Chapter 361. The surroundings were deathly silent. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian. Even though there were frequent fights in the inner court, they usually stopped in moderation. It was rare to see a fight to such an extent. In front of Yi Xian, Xiao Qian was also stunned. He hadn't expected that Yi Xian would actually dare to attack. He forcefully endured the intense pain in his arm as he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. He was about to speak when Yi Xian's sword suddenly pressed against the center of his forehead, 200,000 violet origin crystals. "Are you going to give it to me or not?" As soon as he finished speaking, his right hand pushed forward slightly, and the sword stabbed around an inch into Xiao Qian's body. In an instant, Xiao Qian's face was covered in blood. "He's going to die." Seeing this scene, the crowd knew that this matter was not simple. It was definitely not an ordinary fight. Xiao Qian's expression turned slightly ferocious. "I'm not giving it to you. Kill me if you have the balls." Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stabbed forward with his sword. Xiao Qian's expression instantly changed when he noticed this. He hadn't expected that Yi Xian would really dare to kill him. At this critical moment, Xiao Qian suddenly vanished on the spot, and he was 30 m away when he appeared once more. Moreover, there was a middle-aged man by his side. The students in the surroundings were stunned when they saw the middle-aged man, and then they turned around and ran. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian. "Are you new here?" Yi Xian nodded. "I am." The middle-aged man walked slowly towards Yi Xian. "You're really arrogant, aren't you?" Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, "Senior, are you not going to ask for the reason?" The middle-aged man looked Yi Xian in the eye. "All I saw was you beating someone up and trying to kill someone. That's enough." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Looks like there's no need to say anything else." As soon as he finished speaking, a sword silently appeared between Xiao Qian's brows. However, it was clamped between two fingers before it could even come into contact with Xiao Qian's skin. Those two fingers belonged to the middle-aged man. Looking at the sword in front of him, Xiao Qian's mind went blank. Was this Yi Xian crazy? The middle-aged man's expression also turned cold. He did not expect that Yi Xian would dare to make a move in front of him. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. A moment later, his right hand gently shook in Yi Xian's direction. His movement was very light, but the space in front of Yi Xian shook like a wave. On the opposite side of the middle-aged man, Yi Xian was also shocked. This middle-aged man was definitely not an ordinary void-piercing realm. Not daring to be careless, he took a step forward. In an instant, boundless power of the earth gathered around his body. At the same time, a sword condensed in his hand, and in the next moment, he slashed down. One sword to decide life and death. Chi. As the sword slashed down, the space before him was shattered. However, his sword was unable to reach the end because the power hidden in the space before him was too strong. At this moment, Yi Xian roared angrily and exerted force with both hands. With a chi sound, the sword slashed down, and the power in front of him was directly shattered. Seeing this scene, the middle-aged man in the distance narrowed his eyes. Sword immortal. Yi Xian walked towards the middle-aged man with his sword in hand. His expression was quite ferocious. Under his feet, boundless power of the earth gathered towards him. Seeing that Yi Xian still wanted to make a move, the middle-aged man chuckled. Interesting. As his voice fell, he extended his right hand with his palm facing outwards. In his palm, a powerful force quietly gathered. At this moment, Yi Xian had already appeared in front of the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man slapped out with his palm, and in his palm, a powerful force erupted like a volcano. It swept out. With the appearance of this force, the space around him and Yi Xian distorted. As soon as Yi Xian's sword slashed down, he was directly sent flying. This time, he was sent flying for dozens of feet. As soon as he landed, the ground under his feet instantly cracked. At this moment, the middle-aged man lightly stomped his right foot. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian directly split open. Immediately after, countless black air currents suddenly rushed towards Yi Xian to engulf him. The power of dark matter. Shocked, Yi Xian hurriedly activated the Space Dao Law. As soon as the Space Dao Law was activated, the cracked space around him instantly returned to normal. Seeing this, a look of surprise flashed in the eyes of the middle-aged man nearby. You can actually repair space, and so easily at that. As he spoke, he sized up Yi Xian. You're quite something. Bai Ling and Xiao Qian were also shocked. They had not expected that Yi Xian would actually fight with this middle-aged man. One must know that this middle-aged man was a martial arts instructor of the inner yard. He was responsible for guiding the inner yard students in the martial path. In the entire inner yard, he was definitely someone that everyone feared. However, Yi Xian was able to exchange several blows with him, and he was only at a disadvantage. Yi Xian held his sword and pointed it diagonally to the ground. He was silent. He knew that the middle-aged man in front of him had not used his full strength. His opponent's strength was truly unfathomable. If not for the Space Dao Law, he would have directly died from that attack. Very powerful. He could not beat him for now. Thinking of this, Yi Xian sheathed his sword, turned around, and ran. Seeing Yi Xian run, the middle-aged man was instantly stunned. He ran away just like that? Seeing that Yi Xian had already disappeared into the distance, the middle-aged man shook his head and did not chase after him. He turned around and glanced at Xiao Qian. Xiao Qian hurriedly bowed. Greetings, Genesis Master. The middle-aged man said indifferently, this person is not simple. Moreover, his killing intent is extremely strong. If you encounter him in the future, try not to fight him head-on. After saying this, he turned around and left. Xiao Qian and Xiao Qian's expressions were somewhat ugly. At this moment, Bai Ling said in a low voice, this person is not easy to deal with. Let's wait for Nanshan to come out of seclusion. Xiao Qian was silent for a moment, then nodded. And at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared not far away. Seeing this scene, Xiao Qian and Xiao Qian's expressions changed greatly. Yi Xian grinned and was about to make a move, but at this moment, the Genesis Master who had disappeared earlier appeared in front of Yi Xian again. The Genesis Master coldly looked at Yi Xian. You want to kill that much? Yi Xian said indifferently, why don't you ask who was looking for trouble first? The Genesis Master said, isn't it enough for you to cut off one of his arms? Yi Xian laughed. How is that enough? To be honest, I can't beat you. However, can you protect him for a while? Can you protect him for the rest of his life? As he said this, his expression became somewhat sinister. He pointed his sword at Xiao Qian not far away. If you don't give me 200,000 purple origin crystals, not even a god can save his life. The Genesis Master narrowed his eyes. Young people who don't know when to advance or retreat usually end up in a miserable state. Do you understand? Yi Xian grinned. He pointed his sword at Xiao Qian not far away. I'll say it here. Tomorrow morning, if you don't have 200,000 purple origin crystals, your head will definitely be removed. This daddy will do what he says. As he said this, he faced the Genesis Master. Sir, don't threaten me. I, Yi Xian, reached the true imperial lower realm at the age of 14 and became a sword immortal at the age of 16. I've never been afraid of anyone. As he said this, he turned around and left. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the three Genesis Masters were stunned. Reached the true imperial lower realm at the age of 14? Becoming a sword immortal at the age of 16? The former was still alright, but the latter was somewhat terrifying. A 16-year-old sword immortal, this wasn't just terrifying, it was extremely terrifying. The Genesis Master's face darkened. What kind of lunatic is this? As he said this, he turned around and left. Even he didn't dare to act recklessly against such a monstrous genius. Because if he made a mistake, he would become a mortal enemy. That would be troublesome. Moreover, this kind of person definitely had a powerful force behind him. If he killed him, the force behind him might not dare to take revenge on Dao Yi Academy, but they would definitely take revenge on him. Most importantly, a 16-year-old sword immortal would definitely be nurtured by Dao Yi Academy. Unless it was the dean, no one would dare to go against him. Xiao Qian and Xiao Gu, in particular, had ugly expressions on their faces. Xiao Qian hadn't expected Yi Xian to be so crazy. Was he a lunatic? At this moment, Bai Ling suddenly said, "Let's go back first, then inform Nanshan." Xiao Qian nodded. Soon, the two turned around and left. The students of the inner yard all had their own courtyards. Yi Xian also had his own courtyard. But it was very simple. It was just a wooden house. There were 3 wooden houses on his left and right. Apparently, they all belonged to the students of the inner yard. After Yi Xian returned to his wooden hut, Xiao Gu suddenly arrived. Accompanying him were 2 other men. Inside the hut, Xiao Gu glanced at Yi Xian. "Brother, tell me the truth. You can't be thinking of asking us to fight a Genesis Master with you, right?" "Genesis Master?" Yi Xian was stunned. Then he asked, "The middle-aged man who fought with me earlier?" Xiao Gu nodded. "That's him." Yi Xian laughed. "Don't worry, I'm not asking you to help me fight this Genesis Master." Xiao Gu nodded. "That's good." He hesitated for a moment before asking, "Do you have a grudge with Nanshan?" Yi Xian laughed. "You can say that. When I was in the outer court, he started to cause trouble for me. Now that I'm in the inner court, I can settle my debt with him." Xiao Gu wanted to say something but stopped. Yi Xian asked, "What's wrong?" Xiao Gu said in a low voice, "Nanshan is not simple. In the inner court, there are 4 monstrous geniuses. These 4 can be considered monstrous geniuses among monstrous geniuses, and Nanshan is one of them. Moreover, there are a few people following him. There are about 7 of them. Xiao Qian and Xiao Gu are not the strongest of the 7. Yi Xian did not understand. Those who are able to enter the inner court are all monstrous geniuses. Why are they so willing to follow someone else? Xiao Gu shook his head and sighed. The Violet Flame Pagoda. To enter the Violet Flame Pagoda to cultivate, not only do you need violet origin crystals, you also need great strength. Because within the pagoda, there are a few floors that are extremely good, but most of them have already been occupied by others. They follow Nanshan precisely because he is strong and occupies the southern area of the 3rd floor. By following Nanshan, they can also cultivate on the 3rd floor. Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. Benefits. These people followed Nanshan for benefits. At this time, Xiao Gu suddenly said, "You really want to kill Xiao Qian?" Yi Xian smiled. "Guess." Xiao Gu said in a low voice, "Are you really not afraid of making a big deal out of this?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Making a big deal out of this? What he was least afraid of now was making a big deal out of this. At this time, a man suddenly walked into the house. The man walked to Xiao Ji's side and said a few words. Xiao Ji's face sank, then he looked at Yi Xian. "Your name has appeared on the red list. Someone wants to mess with you." Chapter 362. Red Name List? Yi Xian was stunned for a moment before he asked, "What is this?" Xiao Gu said in a deep voice, "This is a list of our inner court that has been passed down for a long time. If someone's name is on the list, it means that the person who kills that person will receive a reward. Speaking of this, he glanced at Yi Xian. Your bounty is 100,000 purple source crystals. 100,000. Hearing this, Yi Xian flew into a rage. Damn, I'm only worth 100,000 purple source crystals. Are you kidding me? Xiao Gu and the others. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, does the higher-ups allow this kind of red name list to exist? Xiao Gu shook his head. This red name list only exists among us students and it is invisible. No one organizes it. As long as someone on the red name list dies, the bounty will automatically fall into your hands. Yi Xian frowned. Why? Xiao Gu smiled, because every inner court student will have a red name list notary. If you want someone to be on the list, you have to find this notary. Therefore, if the person you want to kill dies, the notary will automatically give the reward to the other party. Yi Xian asked, who is the notary? Xiao Gu said in a deep voice, I don't know. He is a very mysterious person, no one knows who he is. Hearing this, Yi Xian's face sank. Who wants me to die? The first thing he thought of was Nan Shan. But he felt that it was somewhat unlikely. The other party was a super monster and would not play such a trick to kill him. If it was not the other party, then who was it? Yi Xian pondered. Xiao Gu glanced at Yi Xian, you have to be careful. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and said in a deep voice, someone is really coming to kill me? Xiao Gu smiled bitterly. 100,000 purple source crystals can be used to cultivate in the purple flame tower for a month. Many people will definitely be tempted. Yi Xian nodded slightly, I understand. As he spoke, he turned his head to look outside. At this moment, the sky was already dark. Yi Xian said softly, Brother Xiao, a straightforward person will not beat around the bush. There might be many troublesome things for me to deal with in the inner courtyard. Simply put, there might be fights every day. Xiao Gu was silent. Ever since he met Yi Xian, he had vaguely sensed something. He knew that if he followed Yi Xian, there would be money to be made, but there would definitely be a lot of trouble. At this moment, a man beside Xiao Gu suddenly stood up. He looked straight at Yi Xian. I'll follow you. Of course, one fight would cost 10,000 purple origin crystals. The only condition is that you don't hit the instructors. Evidently, he still knew about the matter of Yi Xian exchanging blows with origin masters. They dared to fight the other students of the inner court, but they didn't dare to fight the instructors because doing so might cause them to be expelled from the academy. Yi Xian faced the man and asked with a smile, what's your name? The man cupped his fists together towards Yi Xian, Li Chuan. Yi Xian smiled slightly, all right. As he spoke, he flicked his finger and a storage ring flew in front of Li Chuan. Inside the storage ring were exactly 10,000 purple origin crystals. At this moment, another man also stood up, Brother Yi, I am Gu Qiu, and I am also willing to follow Brother Yi. Yi Xian also took out 10,000 purple origin crystals and gave them to Gu Qiu. Then, he faced Xiao Gu, Brother Xiao, what about you? Xiao Gu glanced at Yi Xian and smiled bitterly, I've already taken your money, do I have any other choice? At this point, he paused slightly before asking, I wonder what Yi Xian plans to do in the future. Yi Xian smiled, fight for the cultivation area of the Violet Flame Pagoda. Hearing this, Xiao Gu and the other two's expressions changed. Very quickly, Xiao Gu said seriously, I am also willing to follow Brother Yi. To fight for a good cultivation area, one must have great strength, or in other words, an extremely strong person to lead them. And Yi Xian just happened to be the right person. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. To put it bluntly, now they were not only helping Yi Xian fight, but also because they were all working for the same interests. There were benefits to be gained. Half an hour later, Xiao Gu and the others left, leaving only Yi Xian in the room. Yi Xian sat on the bed, quietly sitting there for the whole night. The next day. In a courtyard, Xiao Qian was standing there, surrounded by 6 other people, including Bai Ling. Behind Xiao Qian, a man glanced at the sky and sneered, "It's already morning, isn't Yi Xian here to kill people? Why isn't he here yet, is he afraid?" At the side, Bai Ling shook her head, "This person is not a coward, let's wait here." The man said coldly, "In my opinion, let's go find him directly and see what he can do." Bai Ling glanced at the man who spoke, "Qin Feng, you better not underestimate this person. To be able to become a sword immortal at this age, he is not an ordinary person." The man named Qin Feng sneered, "Sword immortal? So what if he is a sword immortal? Could he be more outstanding than Brother Nanshan?" Bai Ling shook her head slightly, "In short, before Nanshan comes out of seclusion, we should wait and see." She was really a little afraid of Yi Xian's strength. One must know that when she and Xiao Qian teamed up, they could not defeat Yi Xian. If she had looked down on Yi Xian in the beginning, then now, she was very afraid of Yi Xian, very afraid. Qin Feng glanced coldly at Bai Ling, "If Brother Nanshan has to personally deal with such a small matter, then what's the point of us?" Moreover, Yi Xian severed one of Xiao Qian's arms as soon as he entered the inner court. This is a slap to all of our faces. So, I think we should take the initiative to look for him and avenge our humiliation. Bai Ling was just about to speak when she seemed to have noticed something, and she suddenly turned around to look at Xiao Qian, who'd been silent all this time. Xiao Qian stood there without moving. Bai Ling hurriedly walked over to Xiao Qian, and she was just about to speak when Xiao Qian's head suddenly fell off his neck. Blood sprayed out like a fountain. The surroundings instantly fell deathly silent when they witnessed this scene. Dead? Xiao Qian is dead. The minds of Bai Ling and the others went blank. Right at this moment, Bai Ling suddenly spoke with a trembling voice, "It's him, he did it. Yi Xian." Everyone quickly thought of Yi Xian. Impossible. Qin Feng suddenly spoke furiously, "How could he possibly kill Xiao Qian without making a sound before us? It's absolutely impossible." Bai Ling stared fixedly at Xiao Qian's head on the ground, and no one knew what she was thinking. Right at this moment, a middle-aged man appeared before everyone. The person that had arrived was the Origin Master. When he saw Xiao Qian's corpse on the ground, the Origin Master's expression instantly turned gloomy. "He did it?" Before anyone could answer, he suddenly turned around and vanished on the spot. On the other hand, Bai Ling and the others hurriedly followed after him. In next to no time, the Origin Master and the others arrived at Yi Xian's wooden house. The Origin Master waved his right hand, and the door to Yi Xian's wooden house was directly opened. At this moment, Yi Xian walked out from within. When he saw the Origin Master and the others, Yi Xian seemed to be stunned, and then he smiled and said, "What wind blew all of you here today?" The Origin Master stared fixedly at Yi Xian, "Did you do it?" Yi Xian frowned and was slightly at a loss. "What do you mean, did I do it?" The Origin Master said coldly, "Xiao Qian is dead." Dead? Yi Xian was stunned for a moment, then he said, "He committed suicide?" Yi Xian. At this moment, Bai Ling, who was not far away, suddenly pointed at him angrily, "Did you do it?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want." Bai Ling said fiercely, "If it wasn't you, who else could it be? You did it." This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. Yi Xian was expressionless. "You say I did it, do you have proof? If you don't, please shut up. If you don't shut up, I'll fight you one-on-one." "You." Bai Ling's face was ashen. Yi Xian ignored Bai Ling and turned to the Origin Master. "Origin Master, do you have proof that I did it?" The Origin Master stared at Yi Xian, not saying anything. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Genesis Master, actually, this mess is between me and them. You better stay out of it." The Origin Master sneered, "As an inner courtyard martial arts instructor, I have a responsibility. Let me. Yi Xian shook his head and interrupted the Origin Master. Since Origin Master wants to interfere, then so be it. The Origin Master slowly clenched his right hand, his face a little gloomy. Yi Xian, what do you think Dao Yi Academy is? You can kill people whenever you want? You. Yi Xian interrupted the Origin Master again. Origin Master, you said I killed people, do you have proof? The Origin Master was a little embarrassed because he really did not have proof. This time, Yi Xian looked at Bai Ling and the others. You said I killed people, but did you see me kill people with your own eyes? Or are you just guessing that I killed people? Bai Ling and the others' faces were a little ugly because they did not know how Xiao Qian died. Xiao Qian's death was too strange. Other than Bai Ling, the others also did not really believe that it was Yi Xian who did it. Xiao Qian was indeed not a match for Yi Xian, but it was impossible that he did not have the slightest ability to fight back. Moreover, it was in front of them. The Origin Master suddenly asked, Yi Xian, what have you been doing since last night? Yi Xian said with a smile, I am meditating in the house. The Origin Master asked again, is there anyone who can testify? Yi Xian nodded, Xiao Gu and the others can testify. The Origin Master stared at Yi Xian for a moment, then turned his head, passed the order to Xiao Gu. Not long later, Xiao Gu arrived in front of everyone. Xiao Gu bowed slightly to the Origin Master. Greetings, Origin Master. The Origin Master glanced at Xiao Gu. Yi Xian has been in the house since last night? Xiao Gu nodded, yes, last night, I, Li Chuan and the others were in Brother Ye's room. The Origin Master narrowed his eyes, why were you in his room? Xiao Gu smiled, Yi Xian reached Sword Immortal at such a young age, we wanted to get to know him. The Origin Master stared at Xiao Gu, are you sure? Xiao Gu nodded, I'm sure. The Origin Master still wanted to ask something, but Yi Xian suddenly said, actually, I think this Xiao Qian might have felt guilty in his heart, so he committed suicide. Saying this, he looked at Bai Ling, who was not far away, do you feel guilty? Hearing this, Bai Ling's expression instantly changed, what do you mean? Yi Xian grinned, actually, if you get to know me, you will find that I am a very, very easy person to get along with. Of course, if someone wants to bully me, I will definitely make them die a horrible death. Oh, let me clarify, this Xiao Qian was not killed by me, really, I swear on my character, on the character of my good brother Mo Yunqi, that he really was not killed by me. P.S. Recently, because of the matters at home, my condition is not particularly good. Whether it is the quality or the updates, they have been affected to a certain extent. When it comes to writing, it is too easy to be affected by external factors. I will adjust my condition as soon as possible, and write a better book. Perhaps I have many, many shortcomings, but I can guarantee that when writing a book, I am serious, and I will write it seriously and properly. And the reader who is looking at the scenery at 0 degrees, don't be too excited, I have been too busy recently, and rarely look at the book comments section. To be honest, seeing that you are pointing out the shortcomings of this book, I am still happy, because it proves that this book has not completely disappointed you, proves that you are still reading it. Just this point, to me personally, I am still happy, I will work even harder. For the readers, but also for myself, after all, I am now the one who makes a living. Finally, thank you everyone for your support. End of this chapter. Chapter 363. In front of the wooden hut, Bai Ling stared at Yi Xian. She knew that it was Yi Xian who did it. But she didn't know how Yi Xian could kill Xiao Qian without anyone noticing. This method was too strange. The Genesis Master was also puzzled. How did Yi Xian kill Xiao Qian in front of everyone? Xiao Qian might have lost an arm, but he was still a true Imperial Magic Realm expert. Moreover, Bai Ling and the rest were around. Mysterious. The Genesis Master looked at Yi Xian, I will let the academy handle this. He turned and left. In the end, he decided not to get involved. The reason why he got involved was because Yi Xian was too arrogant the first time. He wanted to suppress Yi Xian's arrogance. But now, he realized that Yi Xian was too mysterious. If he continued to get involved, he might get himself into trouble. Any student who came to the Dao Yi Academy would definitely have a powerful background. Seeing that the Genesis Master was about to leave, Bai Ling's face changed. Genesis Master? The Origin Master ignored him and disappeared into the distance. In front of the bamboo hut, Qin Feng looked at Yi Xian and said coldly, Yi Xian, you won't live long for someone as arrogant as you. You, Yi Xian pointed at Qin Feng, come and hit me. Hearing this, Qin Feng's face turned ugly. He was about to attack, but Bai Ling stopped him. Bai Ling said, wait for Nan Shan to come out. Yi Xian suddenly said, hey, why are you stopping him? Don't stop him, let him come. Yi Xian. Qin Feng glared at Yi Xian with a ferocious expression. A powerful aura swept out from his body and blasted towards Yi Xian. And at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly dashed forward, and then, a beam of sword light slashed down from above Qin Feng's head. Boom! The aura released by Qin Feng was directly shattered by Yi Xian's sword. Immediately after, Qin Feng retreated rapidly. Just as Yi Xian was about to make another move, Bai Ling and the others suddenly made their moves. Bang! Yi Xian retreated dozens of feet. Bai Ling stared at Yi Xian and said, Yi Xian, do you think you can beat 10 of us? Yi Xian laughed and said, from your tone, it sounds like you want to gang up on me. Bai Ling said coldly, so what if it's a group fight? One-on-one? She knew very well that there was basically no one who could beat Yi Xian in a one-on-one duel. Yi Xian smiled. So what if I'm ganging up on you? As his voice fell, 4 people appeared behind him. These 4 people were Xiao Gu and the others. Seeing Xiao Gu and the rest, Bai Ling's face fell. Just as she was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward, and a sword light slashed towards Bai Ling. Xiao Gu and the others also immediately made their moves. Seeing this scene, Bai Ling narrowed her eyes and was about to make a move. Suddenly, a powerful aura appeared in front of her. Boom! Both sides were directly separated by this aura. Yi Xian and the others stopped, and in front of him, an old man appeared. This person is the Great Elder. Seeing the Great Elder, Bai Ling and the others hurriedly bowed. Greetings, Great Elder. The Great Elder looked at Yi Xian and said, come with me. After speaking, he turned around and left. Beside Yi Xian, Xiao Gu said in a deep voice, Brother Yi. Yi Xian smiled and said, it's fine. After speaking, he followed. Soon, Yi Xian followed the Great Elder to the Dao Yi Hall. There were a few people in the hall, including the Source Masters. Everyone looked at Yi Xian with ugly expressions. Ever since Yi Xian came to the Dao Yi Academy, he has been too good at stirring up trouble. The Great Elder looked at Yi Xian and said, can't you just calm down a little? Yi Xian said with some grievance, I also don't want to cause trouble. You still don't want to cause trouble? Not far away, the Source Master said coldly, after entering the inner courtyard, you killed an inner courtyard student. You, Yi Xian suddenly interrupted the Source Master. Source Master, you said that I killed someone, but do you have proof? The Source Master said indifferently, there is no proof, but Yi Xian, we are all smart people, you know in your heart whether you killed someone or not. Yi Xian said, I didn't kill anyone. The Source Master's mouth twitched, he finally understood what it meant to lie with one's eyes open. At this time, the Great Elder suddenly said, Yi Xian, this time I called you here to ask you, can you calm down a little? Yi Xian smiled bitterly, Great Elder, heaven and earth can bear witness, they were the ones who came to find trouble with me first. The great elder was expressionless. Then you killed them? You want to kill someone because of a little fight? Yi Xian said, I didn't kill anyone. The grand elder looked at Yi Xian for a long time. In the end, he shook his head and sighed. Let's not talk about this for now. I have something to ask you. Did you really give that treasure to Wang Qianya? Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. Here it comes again. He nodded. If the great elder doesn't believe me, you can search me. Search. The great elder looked at Yi Xian and nodded slightly. All right, the old man still wants to confirm it. As soon as he finished speaking, his divine sense fell on Yi Xian. Seeing that the great elder was really going to search him, Yi Xian's expression gradually turned cold, but it quickly returned to normal. Very soon, the grand elder furrowed his brows because he had scanned Yi Xian's entire body with his spirit and found nothing. After a moment of silence, the great elder looked at Yi Xian. I have a mission for you. Mission? Yi Xian was slightly taken aback, then asked, what mission? The great elder said, go to Cliff Mountain. Cliff Mountain? Yi Xian was a little puzzled. The great elder said, our Dao Yi Institute has many properties, this Cliff Mountain is one of them. Previously, we received news that 3 guards and 2 students disappeared for no reason in the past month. Go check it out. Yi Xian hesitated, then asked, is there any benefit? Hearing this, the mouths of the instructors and elders in the hall twitched. The great elder glanced at Yi Xian. Of course there is. If you find out the truth and settle the matter at Cliff Mountain, you can enter the Violet Flame Pagoda for free for half a month. Yi Xian hurriedly nodded, all right. I'll go to Cliff Mountain. The great elder nodded, you may leave. Yi Xian turned and left. Inside the hall, the great elder glanced at Yi Xian, not knowing what he was thinking. At the side, a Genesis master suddenly said in a low voice, everyone, it is undeniable that this person is extremely talented. Even in the inner courtyard, he is top-notch. However, everyone has seen his personality. He is a complete thorn in the side. If he is allowed to stay in the inner courtyard, it will not be peaceful. Moreover, this person seems to have a grudge with Nanshan. After Nanshan comes out of seclusion, the 2 of them will probably fight to the death. The great elder nodded slightly, therefore, I sent him to Cliff Mountain to temporarily resolve the conflict between the 2 of them. On the side, an old man nodded slightly. This person's temperament isn't that bad. It's just that he's hot-tempered and needs to be tempered. He then looked at the grand elder. There's one more thing. Recently, we've noticed some experts around Dao Yi Academy, but they're all in hiding. If I'm not wrong, they might be here for this Yi Xian. The great elder said in a deep voice, do you know which forces it is? The elder shook his head. I don't know. They are all in the dark and haven't shown themselves. The grand elder was silent for a moment, and then he said, pay more attention when you have time. The Genesis master suddenly said, everyone in the outside world thinks that the treasure is in our Dao Yi Academy. I personally think that Yi Xian should be allowed to leave. The great elder shook his head. Even if he leaves, others will think that the treasure has fallen into the hands of the Dao Yi Academy. The problem is that the treasure is not in the hands of the Dao Yi Academy. The Origin Master said in a low voice, it's still in Yi Xian's hands? But Grand Elder, you. The Grand Elder looked out of the hall, and no one knew what he was thinking. After Yi Xian left the hall, he looked up at the sky. He hadn't contacted Ling, or Lanxiu yet, because he realized that the Dao Yi Academy was coveting him, or rather, the prison pagoda. After a while, Yi Xian shook his head. He could only take it one step at a time. An hour later, Yi Xian left the Dao Yi Academy and headed for Cliff Mountain. As soon as Yi Xian left the Dao Yi Academy, a voice resounded in his mind. Go back. It was the voice of the great elder on the second floor. Yi Xian frowned. Why? The great elder said in a low voice, "Sense the surroundings." Yi Xian stopped in his tracks and sensed his surroundings, but he couldn't sense anything. Yi Xian was puzzled. "There's no one." The great elder said, "If you can't sense anyone, what does that mean?" Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned solemn. He couldn't sense anyone, which meant that the other party's strength was far beyond his. Without hesitation, he hurried back to Dao Yi City. Inside the city, Yi Xian asked in a low voice, "Great elder, how many people are following me?" The great elder replied, 6. "You know one of them, it's the old man in the hall." The great elder. Yi Xian's expression turned cold. The other party was definitely not here to protect him. Yi Xian stood in place for a long time, and after a while, the corners of his mouth curled up. Half an hour later, Yi Xian left Dao Yi City, but he didn't go too far. Soon, an old man in a gray robe appeared in front of him. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian said, "You're here for the treasure, aren't you?" The old man was taken aback, but Yi Xian said, "You're late." The old man frowned. "What do you mean?" Yi Xian said, "The treasure is in someone else's hands, so you're late." The old man narrowed his eyes. "Do you think I'll believe you?" Yi Xian smiled. "Why wouldn't you believe me?" The old man snickered. "Why would you give such a treasure to someone else? Besides, if you gave it to someone else, they wouldn't let you live." Yi Xian sighed. "It's precisely because it's too precious that I gave it to someone else. I'm too weak now, and it's not a blessing, but a curse. If you don't believe me, then make your move." The old man stared at Yi Xian for a long time, and then said, "It's in the hands of Dao Yi Academy?" Yi Xian fell silent. The old man's expression turned cold. "Yes or no?" Yi Xian didn't speak. The old man stared at Yi Xian for a long time, and finally, his divine sense fell on Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't resist, and soon, Yi Xian was scanned inside and out, including the contents of his spatial ring. There was nothing. The old man's face darkened when he saw this. After a while, he looked at Yi Xian. "I don't believe you." Yi Xian turned and ran, and in the blink of an eye, he was back in Dao Yi City. The old man was stunned. Chapter 364. Ran away? The gray-robed elder's face darkened. He glanced coldly at Dao Yi City not far away. "Let's see how long you can hide." As soon as he finished speaking, he had already disappeared. Inside the city, Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. These experts were not so easy to fool. In the corner, Yi Xian was deep in thought. He knew that these people outside had already guessed that the prison pagoda had fallen into the hands of Dao Yi Academy. However, they did not dare to ask for it from Dao Yi Academy. But they dared to ask him for it. Therefore, this move of hatred was useless. These people would not let him go. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian asked, "Second-floor guru, can you help me fight?" "No." The second-floor guru replied decisively. "Why?" Yi Xian was puzzled. The second-floor guru replied, "To recover my yuan qi." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. The second-floor guru could not help. The fourth floor could not help either. He could only rely on himself. And he could not defeat them. If he could not defeat them, he had to outsmart them. At that moment, the second-floor guru suddenly said, "There are 3 swords at the top of the pagoda. You can borrow the rightmost one." Yi Xian was struck dumb. Soon, he hurried to say, "Borrow it? Isn't that sword suppressing the pagoda?" The second-floor guru said, "This pagoda is being suppressed by a ray of sword light. It will be fine for the time being. Therefore, you can borrow that sword." Of course, with your current strength, you may not be able to use it. Yi Xian said, "Second floor guru, please don't trick me. If I pull out the sword, the pagoda will collapse and I will be gone." Scram! An angry shout came from the second floor. Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. "Don't be angry, don't be angry. I was wrong." The second floor guru did not reply. Yi Xian used the primal chaos chi to conceal himself. Then, he found a secluded place and entered the World Prison Pagoda. He arrived at the top of the World Prison Pagoda. In front of him, there were 3 swords. All 3 swords gave him a different feeling. His gaze fell on the rightmost sword. Looking at this sword, Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before placing his right hand on the hilt. The sword trembled slightly, and so did the entire prison pagoda. Yi Xian gently pulled the sword out of the ground. Very easy. Yi Xian himself was a little shocked because it was too easy. Right at this moment, the sword trembled slightly, and a subtle sword cry suddenly resounded. In the next moment, a shapeless sword force suddenly appeared above Yi Xian's head. At the instant this sword force appeared, Yi Xian's entire body directly split open. Yi Xian was horrified and hurriedly stabbed the sword in. After the sword fell, the invisible force of the sword instantly disappeared. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, his heart was tumbling like waves. When he held the sword just now, he felt like his entire body was sucked dry. Powerless. A deep sense of powerlessness. Besides that, the force of the sword was so strong that even he couldn't withstand it. The power of heaven and earth couldn't compare to the force of this sword. What a terrifying sword! At this moment, the second floor guru's voice suddenly rang out. "You can't use this sword right now, not even once." Yi Xian nodded with a serious expression. This sword's terror was beyond his imagination. Right now, he couldn't even hold the sword, let alone use it. It was too terrifying. At this moment, Yi Xian realized how insignificant he was. He couldn't even lift a sword. Thinking of this, Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Although he was a little shocked, he wasn't discouraged. Because he was still young. As long as he worked hard, there was nothing impossible in the future. Although he couldn't use this sword, Yi Xian thought of a use for it. Yi Xian left the prison tower in 7.5 minutes. Then he went out of the city. He left the city in broad daylight. After leaving the city, he entered a mountain range. From the second floor guru, he found out that there were 6 to 7 people behind him. One of them had a very obscure aura that even the second floor guru couldn't completely lock on. After entering the mountain range, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Soon, an old man appeared where Yi Xian disappeared. It was the grey-robed old man from before. The grey-robed old man frowned. How could he disappear without a trace? As he said this, his expression suddenly changed. This was because a man in black had appeared in front of him. The man in black stood in front of him without a sound. There was no aura at all. He couldn't even feel his existence. The grey-robed old man's expression instantly darkened. The man in black had his back to the grey-robed old man. His hands were behind his back. His voice was a little hoarse. "Are you looking for him?" The grey-robed old man glanced at the man in black. "Who are you?" The man in black coldly said, "Who do you think I am?" The grey-robed old man narrowed his eyes. "Are you also here for Yi Xian's treasure?" The man in black sneered. "The rest of you, come out." There was no movement around. The man in black coldly said, "What? Do you want the old man to invite you out? How arrogant of you." At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the right side of the man in black. Soon, a middle-aged man in a luxurious robe appeared on the right side of the man in black. The middle-aged man held 2 white jade balls in his hands. The 2 balls gently collided against each other. From time to time, there would be some ear-piercing sounds of friction. The middle-aged man looked at the man in black and sneered. "Let me guess. You should be the person behind Yi Xian?" The man in black calmly said, "Those who want that treasure, come out and report your sect." The middle-aged man smiled. "What, you want to get rid of all of us at once?" As he spoke, he sized up the man in black and grinned. "I have to say, you are indeed strange. But if that's all you have, I'm afraid you won't be able to suppress us." The man in black softly said, "You are very confident." The middle-aged man smiled. "Confidence comes from strength." As he spoke, he looked around. "Looks like none of them are willing to come out. Then let me start first. I am the leader of the Ascendant Cloud sect, Mo Yanshao." The man in black suddenly pointed to the left with his right hand. 30 feet ahead, that old man over there. "Stop looking, I'm talking to you. Come out." After a moment of silence, an old man appeared where the man in black was pointing. Seeing this, Mo Yanxiao's eyes narrowed. The old man only stared at the man in black. The man in black said, "Which force are you from?" The old man was about to speak when Mo Yanxiao suddenly laughed. "The first elder of the Tai sect, Gu Xianfeng." The old man looked at Mo Yanxiao coldly and did not speak. The man in black suddenly pointed in front of him. 40 feet away, the one in white. "Come out." As soon as Yi Xian spoke, a middle-aged man in white stepped out. Seeing this person, Gu Xianfeng and Mo Yanxiao both frowned. The middle-aged man in white looked at the man in black. "Impressive." The man in black asked, "Which sect are you from?" The middle-aged man in white said softly, "Rebirth sect, Fang Chan." The man in black nodded. "The remaining 3, will you come out yourselves, or should I invite you out?" "Interesting." A voice rang out not far in front of the man in black. Very quickly, a white-haired old man appeared. The white-haired old man smiled. "Looks like we've met an extremely powerful cultivator today. The old man is very curious about your identity." As he spoke, he paused and smiled. "I forgot to introduce myself. The old man is a lone cultivator. I don't belong to any sect. I'm here for the treasure." The man in black clenched his right hand. "Where are the other 2? Very quickly, 2 men in black appeared beside him. They stood together. Clearly, they were in cahoots. The man in black nodded. "There's one more." "Why? Is the great elder of Dao Yi Academy so cowardly?" As soon as the man in black finished speaking, an old man appeared beside him. It was the great elder of Dao Yi Academy. The great elder stared at the man in black. "How should I address you?" The man in black shook his head. "Great elder, are you here to protect Yi Xian or are you here to fight for the treasure with them?" The great elder replied, "What does this have to do with you?" The man in black chuckled. "Of course it has to do with me. If it's the former, then it's fine. If it's the latter, then the old man might have to clean up his sect today." Hearing this, everyone was stunned. This man in black was also from Dao Yi Academy? The great elder stared at the man in black. "There's no way you're from Dao Yi Academy. Who are you?" Everyone looked at the man in black. Obviously, they were all very curious about this man in black who had suddenly appeared. There were very, very few people that they could not sense. There were only 2 reasons for this. One was that the person was far stronger than them. The other was that the person had a special technique. The man in black shook his head. "Let's not talk about this for now. Let's talk about Yi Xian. He's my disciple." Today, the old man's clone appeared to clone. High Cloud Sect Headmaster Mo Yanshao suddenly asked, "You said you're a clone?" The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed slightly when they heard these words. The man in black asked, "What do you think?" Mo Yanshao smiled. "I have to say, you're very strange indeed. Even we can't sense your presence. That's very shocking. However, no one here is easily frightened. Since you've asked us to come out, if we don't show a thing or two, wouldn't it be a little unreasonable?" The man in black chuckled. "I understand. You think the old man is trying to scare you, right?" Mo Yanshao spoke indifferently. "We know that Yi Xian is such a monstrous genius, so he definitely has someone backing him. However, we'd like to see exactly how strong that person is." The man in black asked, "You want to see?" Mo Yanshao smiled. "Please make your move." Everyone looked at the man in black. Meanwhile, the man in black opened his right hand. Suddenly, a sword appeared in his palm. In the next moment, the sword trembled slightly, and a sword howl resounded through the sky. "Ohm!" As the sword howl resounded, the space and ground in an area of over 100 kilometers cracked apart. At the same time, an invisible sword aura appeared in the surroundings. As it appeared, everyone felt as if a myriad of mountains were pressing down on them. Everyone was horrified. Meanwhile, the man in black suddenly said, "The old man is invincible. All of you do as you please. Attack together." All of them were speechless. Chapter 365. Silence reigned. Everyone stared at the sword. Apart from seriousness, there was also deep fear in their eyes. Even Mo Yanshao, who had always been calm, had a grave expression on his face. The sword gave off the feeling that it could shatter a starry sky. Powerful. Unreasonably powerful. Just then, the black-robed man's voice rang out again. "What? Is no one attacking?" Mo Yanshao glanced at the black-robed man and said in a low voice, "How should I address you, senior?" Senior. Once an expert made a move, it was obvious. The black-robed man had only revealed his sword and it was already so terrifying. If he attacked, wouldn't it be earth-shattering? Therefore, to the crowd, this black-robed man was undoubtedly a peerless big shot. The black-robed man said coolly, "The old man has long forgotten his name. Even if he remembered, you kids wouldn't recognize the old man." At this point, he paused for a moment and put the sword away. Just then, the crowd felt a weight lift off their shoulders and their bodies relaxed. The black-robed man suddenly asked, "Is there anything on the interstellar bounty list in the never-ending starfield?" Mo Yanshao thought about it and shook his head. "Apart from the one Yi Xian has, there isn't anything else." The black-robed man sneered. "Then do you know why that ultimate treasure is in the never-ending starfield? Do you know why the leader of the Azure Firmament World's Realm Defense Alliance died?" Mo Yanshao glanced at the black-robed man. "It should have been done by a senior, right?" The black-robed man shook his head. "It wasn't done by the old man. To put it bluntly, it would be a disaster for the entire never-ending starfield if such an ultimate treasure fell into the hands of the never-ending starfield. How dare you try to snatch it? You really don't know what's good for you." Mo Yanshao frowned. "Why?" Just then, the Grand Elder suddenly said, "Because the entire never-ending starfield doesn't have the fortune to enjoy such an ultimate treasure." Hearing this, the crowd fell silent. Only then did they realize the gravity of the situation. Yi Xian didn't have the fortune to enjoy such an ultimate treasure, but who in the never-ending starfield could? Themselves? What would happen if they obtained it? Everyone's expressions darkened at this thought. If he obtained it, he would definitely die. At this time, the black-clothed man said again, "All of you only know that Yi Xian possesses a great treasure, but do you know his identity?" Everyone looked at the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man snorted coldly. The other old man doesn't want to say much. At this point, he suddenly turned to face the Great Elder. Great Elder, the old man knows what you're thinking. Even the old man would be tempted by such a precious treasure, let alone you. However, you must remember, even if you obtain this treasure, what can you do? Not only did you bring trouble to yourself, but you also brought trouble to our Dao-E Academy. The Great Elder looked at the black-clothed man in shock. Senior, are you really from the Dao-E Academy? The man in black said coldly, why? Is the identity of the Dao-E Academy so precious that you even want to impersonate an old man? The Great Elder hurriedly said, that's not what I meant. As he spoke, he paused for a moment and said, may I know Senior's name? The black-clothed man replied indifferently, don't ask about that. Remember, Yi Xian is in our Dao-E Academy. To our Dao-E Academy, it's a blessing and a curse. If he were to die here, you'll be the greatest sinner of our academy. As for all of you, the old man has no interest in tangling with you. If you dare to have any designs on him, the old man will not let you off. As his voice landed, he disappeared from the spot. Just like that, he disappeared without a single trace of aura. After the black-clothed man left, Mo Yen Xiao said solemnly, seems like there's a huge whirlpool behind this Yi Xian. As he spoke, he looked at the crowd. What that senior said just now doesn't make sense. Such a precious treasure, Yi Xian doesn't have the fortune to enjoy it, and neither do we. Everyone, farewell. As he finished speaking, he disappeared from the spot. After Mo Yen Xiao left, the rest followed suit, leaving only two people behind. They were the Great Elder of the Dao-E Academy, and the Gate of Life's leader, Fang Chan. Fang Chan looked at the spot where the black-clothed man had disappeared and muttered softly, such a move, truly unfathomable. As he spoke, he smiled faintly, what a pity, I should have exchanged blows with him just now. If I could, I would have benefited greatly. The Great Elder asked indifferently, you could have taken that blow? Hearing this, Fang Chan's smile slowly disappeared. The Great Elder looked at the spot where the black-clothed man had disappeared in silence. A senior of the Dao-E Academy. As far as he could remember, the Dao-E Academy did not have such a terrifying swordsman, not even in the past 1,000 years. Could it be more than 1,000 years? The Great Elder's expression turned serious at this thought. After a while, the Great Elder turned to leave. Just then, Fang Chan suddenly spoke up, Great Elder, as far as I know, Yi Xian seems to have been targeted by someone in the Dao-E Academy. The Great Elder stopped and looked at Fang Chan, who smiled. That senior also said that Yi Xian's presence in the Dao-E Academy is a mixed blessing and disaster. Why don't you give him to the Gate of Life? The Great Elder laughed coldly, scram. As he finished speaking, he disappeared from the spot. Fang Chan smiled faintly, then disappeared as well. On the other side, Yi Xian sat on the ground, his heart filled with lingering fear. That black-clothed man was him. Of course he was afraid. If he had been exposed in front of so many experts, he wouldn't even know how he died. It was too dangerous. But he had no choice. If he didn't, these people would follow him every day, he wouldn't be able to live. Most importantly, he couldn't beat them. Sword. Yi Xian thought of that sword. If he could master that sword, he would be able to kill all those powerhouses just now with one strike. The problem was that he couldn't control that sword at all. He couldn't even hold it. Sigh. Yi Xian sighed softly. He had to cultivate hard and reach the void-piercing realm as soon as possible. After a while, Yi Xian quietly left and arrived at Cliff Mountain. Cliff Mountain wasn't big, but it was a treasure mountain because it produced nearly 1,000,000 purple origin crystals every year. Many people coveted this treasure mountain, but no faction dared to touch it because it belonged to the Dao-E Academy. The name of the Dao-E Academy was very influential in the never-ending Starfield. The person who received Yi Xian was an old man named Lu Wen, who was in charge of the affairs of Cliff Mountain. In a large hall, Lu Wen glanced at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, didn't the academy send anyone else?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "Am I not enough?" Lu Wen shook his head. "Of course not." Yi Xian said, "Tell me the details." Lu Wen said in a low voice, "Recently, people have been going missing in Cliff Mountain. Not only that, but the purple origin crystals underground are also decreasing. I have been investigating for a long time, but I don't have any clues." Yi Xian asked, "Was it done by an outside faction?" Lu Wen shook his head. "I don't think so." "Why?" Yi Xian asked. Lu Wen said in a low voice, "If it was done by an outside faction, why would they kill one person at a time? And only a few purple origin crystals were taken?" Yi Xian thought about it and nodded. "That's true. If it's not an outsider, then it's one of us." Lu Wen smiled bitterly. "I'm the only one left here. As for the others, they either died or left." Yi Xian, a moment later, Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Where did those people die?" Lu Wen said in a low voice, "Underground." Yi Xian said, "Take me there." Yi Xian followed Lu Wen to the bottom of Cliff Mountain. Yi Xian saw scattered purple origin crystals on some of the mountain walls. Lu Wen said, "These purple origin crystals are still small, and the purple origin qi in them is not enough. Therefore, it's not time to mine them." Yi Xian nodded. "Is this Cliff Mountain the biggest source of income for Dao Yi Academy?" Lu Wen shook his head. "No. Dao Yi Academy's biggest source of income is Dao Yi City. There are many factions in the city, and they have to pay rent to Dao Yi Academy every year. The monthly rent for the area in front of the city gate is several times higher than Cliff Mountain's income." Yi Xian understood. He understood why the Dao Yi Academy sent him to this place. It was because this wasn't an important place. At the same time, he also realized that the wealth of these powerful factions was terrifying. He still had about 800,000 purple origin crystals, which was a lot. However, when compared to these top forces, there was simply no comparison at all. Lu Wen suddenly said, "Do you still want to go down and see?" Yi Xian thought about it and was about to speak when the voice of the god on the second floor rang in his head. "There are spirits down there. Be careful." "Spirits?" Yi Xian was taken aback. Then he asked, "What spirit?" The god on the second floor said, "There are spirits born in the world, such as Xiaoling, She is a good one, but there are also evil ones. The most common ones are evil spirits, and evil spirits. They are called spirits." Yi Xian asked, "Is she strong?" The god on the second floor said, "Do you think Xiaoling, is strong?" Yi Xian gave a wry smile. Xiaoling, was strong, but he had no idea how strong she was. "What about the spirits down there?" Yi Xian hesitated. He had to be careful when dealing with the spirits in the world, because if he was not careful, they could give him a surprise. The god on the second floor said, "Let's go down and see." Yi Xian hesitated and asked, "Is it dangerous?" The god on the second floor said, "Yes, but it is also an opportunity. If your sword has a spirit as its sword spirit, its power will multiply." "A spirit as a sword spirit?" Yi Xian was shocked. "Is that okay?" "Yes." In the same place, Yi Xian thought about it and nodded. He seemed to think of something and looked at Lu Wen. "You go back first. I will go down and check it myself." Lu Wen hesitated and nodded. "Young Master Yi, be careful." After saying that, he turned and left. After Lu Wen left, Yi Xian continued to go down. The lower he went, the more purple origin crystals there were. However, they were all unripe. If he took them now, the value of these purple origin crystals would be greatly reduced. Moreover, there were not many purple origin crystals, so Yi Xian was not tempted. About half an hour later, Yi Xian reached the bottom, but he did not see the spirit. Yi Xian said, "God on the second floor, can you find its existence?" The god on the second floor said, "It has been following you." Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 366. Yi Xian's face was a little dark. "Are you sure?" The master on the second floor said lightly, "Turn around and take a look." Yi Xian turned around, but there was nothing behind him. At this time, the voice of the master on the second floor sounded again, "Turn around again." Yi Xian immediately turned around, but there was still nothing. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. "Are you messing with me?" As soon as his voice fell, he seemed to feel something. He suddenly turned around, only to see a blood-red little claw coming at him head-on. Yi Xian was shocked and quickly dodged backward. At the same time, a sword suddenly flew out from the sword case behind him and slashed at the little claw. Bang! The little claw trembled violently and retracted. In front of Yi Xian stood a little guy. It was not very big, like a baby, with a sheep horn braid, and its whole body was blood-red. Its appearance was quite ugly, and one could tell at a glance that it was not a good person. Spirit. The little guy stared at Yi Xian, and its eyes did not hide the greed. Yi Xian frowned and asked in his heart, "What kind of spirit is this?" After a moment of silence, the master on the second floor said, "It should be the legendary blood spirit, condensed from fresh blood, and loves to drink blood. However, logically speaking, this kind of spirit is generally born in places of war. How could it be here? Blood spirit." Yi Xian looked at the little guy in front of him. At this moment, the little guy suddenly disappeared, and it slapped at Yi Xian at an extremely fast speed. Yi Xian was shocked, and did not dare to be careless. His figure flashed, and a sword light slashed straight down. Boom! This sword slashed down, and a figure retreated rapidly. This figure was Yi Xian. Yi Xian retreated to the mountain wall before stopping, and the mountain wall behind him directly collapsed. After stopping, Yi Xian's expression was incomparably solemn. This guy was so strong. At this moment, the spirit's face suddenly looked ferocious. The next moment, it slapped forward, and suddenly, a bloody mist appeared. The bloody mist engulfed Yi Xian, and at that moment, Yi Xian felt dizzy, as if he was going to suffocate. Scram! At this moment, an angry shout suddenly sounded from the second floor. The next moment, the blood mist around Yi Xian was directly shattered. At the same time, the spirit had already retreated dozens of feet away. At this moment, it looked around with a solemn face, and there was a hint of fear in its eyes. Yi Xian took a deep breath. At that moment, he almost died. So powerful. Yi Xian's expression became extremely solemn. The voice of God on the second floor suddenly sounded. "Right now, you are only average in this system. What gives you the confidence to look down on a spirit?" Yi Xian was silent. From the green firmament world to the present, he had been improving very quickly because of special skills, special people, and special treasures. Under such circumstances, with such a speed of growth, it was inevitable that he would become arrogant. For example, just now, he did not treat this spirit seriously. Otherwise, he would not have been subdued by it in one move. At this moment, the eyes of the spirit suddenly fell on Yi Xian. It stared at Yi Xian, and suddenly, two bloody lights shot out from its eyes. At this moment, Yi Xian did not dare to be careless. He opened his right hand, and the space sword instantly condensed. The next moment, he suddenly slashed forward. One sword to decide life and death. This sword slashed down. Swoosh! The two bloody lights were instantly shattered. At the same time, the spirit retreated again and again. This time, it directly retreated to the mountain wall opposite to Yi Xian. The spirit stared at Yi Xian, and its eyes became somewhat ferocious. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "This guy is not easy to deal with." God on the second floor said, "If you subdue it and seal it in your sword will change qualitatively. At that time, your strength will also change qualitatively." This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Hearing this, Yi Xian was quite tempted. Strength. Now, he was eager to improve his strength. Thinking of this, Yi Xian looked at the evil spirit not far away, and the latter was staring at him. The next moment, one person and one spirit disappeared in place at the same time. Boom! An explosion suddenly sounded in the field, and then, a bloody light and sword light shook the surroundings, and the surroundings were a mess. Yi Xian held the long sword in his hand and pointed it diagonally to the ground. Not far in front of him, there was a sea of blood. At this moment, he could no longer find the true location of the spirit. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly turned around and ran. His speed was extremely fast, and he disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the moment when Yi Xian disappeared, a red light shot out and chased after Yi Xian. But when it turned a corner, it suddenly stopped because Yi Xian had disappeared, and even his aura was gone. The spirit scanned its surroundings. Suddenly, a sword appeared above its head without any warning. The sudden sword made the spirit's face change dramatically, and a bloody light shook out of its body. Boom! The bloody light forcibly resisted Yi Xian's sword, but the powerful force contained in the sword forced it to retreat again and again. In the process of its retreat, for flying swords suddenly drilled out of the space around it, the field was quiet. The spirit was nailed by the 4 swords, and it did not dare to move. Yi Xian walked in front of the spirit. The latter looked ferocious, clenched its claws, and the killing intent in its eyes was still not reduced. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, "Can you speak? Damn human beings!" The spirit suddenly roared, and its voice was like thunder, making Yi Xian's eardrums sting. Yi Xian was a little speechless. "What do you mean by damn human beings? There are many bad human beings, but there are also many good ones, right?" "No." At this time, the voice of the god on the second floor suddenly sounded, "Human beings are greedy by nature, and they are the greediest creatures in this universe." "Yes." Xiao Linger's voice also suddenly sounded, "Human beings are the worst. Super bad. Kill human beings." Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. He felt that he had offended the public by saying something for human beings. The god on the second floor suddenly said, "In my place, human beings are all dead." Yi Xian frowned, "Why?" The god on the second floor said, "Because human beings have offended the public, and they have been slaughtered by the joint forces of all races." Yi Xian. "Let me go." At this time, the spirit suddenly roared. Yi Xian suddenly put his sword between the spirit's eyebrows, and the sword went half an inch into it. The spirit suddenly quieted down. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Be my sword spirit voluntarily, and I will let you live." The spirit glared at Yi Xian, "No." At this time, Yi Xian's sword suddenly went half an inch deeper, and the spirit's body became stiff. It hurriedly said, "We can negotiate." Hearing this, Yi Xian was immediately amused. This guy is afraid of death. As long as he is afraid of death. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Are you really willing?" The spirit looked at Yi Xian and nodded slightly, "Of course." Yi Xian smiled and said, "I don't believe you." After that, he asked in his heart, "God on the second floor, do you have any ideas?" After a moment of silence, the voice of the god on the second floor sounded, "Take control of a wisp of his soul, so that he will not dare to betray us again." Yi Xian nodded and then looked at the spirit. I want to control your soul. Hearing this, the spirit's expression suddenly became ferocious. At this time. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. But Yi Xian suddenly said, you don't want to? Then die. The spirit stared at Yi Xian, damn human, how can I be enslaved by you for life? Do it. Yi Xian frowned slightly and was about to do it. At this time, the voice of the god on the second floor suddenly sounded, 1 year later, he will give you back your freedom. This time, the voice of the god on the second floor was not transmitted to Yi Xian, so the spirit also heard it. The spirit looked around and then looked at Yi Xian, 1 year? Yi Xian said in a deep voice in his heart, is 1 year enough? The god on the second floor said quietly, if it is not enough, then you are incompetent. Yi Xian smiled bitterly and then nodded, 1 year it is. Only 1 year. The spirit thought for a moment and gradually calmed down. After a moment, it looked at Yi Xian. Then, a wisp of blood suddenly floated in front of Yi Xian, and Yi Xian caught it. The god on the second floor said, put it in your mind, and you will know what it is thinking. At the critical moment, you can control its life and death. Without hesitation, Yi Xian put the wisp of soul into his mind. Soon, Yi Xian felt that there was more information in his mind. It was the spirit's information. And the spirit's thought at this moment was to kill him. Yi Xian shook his head and did not argue with this guy. Anyway, now the spirit's life and death were in his hands. Yi Xian was about to leave, but at this moment, the spirit suddenly said, I have stored something below, I want to take it away. Below? Yi Xian looked down and there was no way down. This was the end. The spirit suddenly flew to a place not far to the right of Yi Xian, its right claw gently pressed forward. Soon, the mountain wall was directly separated, and it ran down. Yi Xian hurriedly followed. Soon, Yi Xian was stunned. In front of him was a violet genesis crystal the size of a small mountain. A lot of purple source crystals. At least 500,000. And they were all mature. Yi Xian was stunned. The spirit turned to look at Yi Xian, help me take it away. Yi Xian was slightly stunned, but soon he understood. This guy should not have treasures like a storage ring. Yi Xian said seriously, this. Is there a problem? Asked the spirit. Yi Xian hurriedly said, no problem, it's just a small matter. I'll help you take it all away. Then, with a wave of his right hand, he stored all the resource crystals into the prison pagoda. At this moment, his face was calm, but his heart was blooming with joy. Just like this, Yi Xian brought the spirit back to the outside of Cliff Mountain. He also found Lu Wan. In front of Lu Wan, Yi Xian quietly sighed, I am useless, I did not find anything. When I return, I will report to the Grand Elder and ask the Grand Elder to send someone else. Farewell. Then, he turned and disappeared into the sky. Lu Wan. Yi Xian had just returned to Dao Yi Academy and was about to go into seclusion to mold the spirit into the sword when Xiao Gu and the others found him. Xiao Gu looked at Yi Xian with a solemn expression. Nanshan is out of seclusion. And he said that Dao Yi Academy will either have him or you. Yi Xian. P.S. A reader told me that he was cuckolded. The reason was that his girlfriend went out to drink with someone, got drunk, and then. He said that his girlfriend also regretted it, and now he did not know what to do. To be honest, girls should not go out to drink with people with bad character. There are not many people in this world who are as noble and moral as me. End of this chapter. Chapter 367. Nanshan. Yi Xian nodded, he came looking for me? Xiao Gu shook his head, no. However, since he said this, it means that he really won't rest until one of us dies. Speaking of this, he looked at Yi Xian. Nanshan has a lot of connections in the inner court, you have to be prepared. Yi Xian smiled, I know. You can leave first. Remember to inform me immediately if there is any news. Xiao Gu nodded, then turned and left. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, wait. Xiao Gu stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled, stand guard for me, I'm cultivating in seclusion, don't let anyone in. Xiao Gu glanced at Yi Xian, if I can beat them, I won't let a single one in, if I can't beat them, I can't do anything. Yi Xian smiled, all right. Xiao Gu nodded, then turned and left the wooden house. After Xiao Gu left, Yi Xian entered the prison pagoda. Inside the pagoda, the spirit was currently revolving around Xiao Linger, while Xiao Linger was planting her spirit fruits. Up until now, there were more and more spirit fruits in the prison pagoda, and they were all top-grade spirit fruits, worth a lot. If he sold them, he would definitely get a lot of purple source crystals. Seeing Yi Xian, Xiao Linger was a little wary, mine. Yi Xian smiled, yours, it's all yours. Xiao Linger nodded, she hesitated for a moment, then said, it's also yours. Yi Xian was slightly stunned, this little girl was rarely generous. At this time, a spirit not far away reached out its claws to grab a spirit fruit. Seeing this, little Ling-er's face changed, and she slapped the spirit fruit in front of her. Bang! The spirit was directly slapped away, finally slamming heavily into a nearby wall. The corners of Yi Xian's eyes twitched at the sight of this. Lil Linger's strength was really freakish. He had fought with spirits before and knew how powerful they were. However, the spirit was sent flying by Xiao Linger with a single slap. Fortunately, this Xiao Linger doesn't know that I can fight very well. Not far away, the spirit looked at Xiao Linger, his eyes full of fear. Xiao Linger ignored the spirit and continued to water her spirit fruits. At this moment, Yi Xian handed a one spirit fruit to the spirit. The spirit looked at Yi Xian with a hint of fear in its eyes. Right now, it could be said that its life was in the hands of Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, don't worry, I don't have any ill intentions towards you. 1 year later, I'll return you your freedom. I mean it, but before that, you have to cooperate with me. The dark spirit took a look at Yi Xian and then took the spiritual fruit. Yi Xian smiled, then looked up at the second floor. Second floor guru, how do I put it into my sword? After a while, the second floor guru said, pick a sword. Pick a sword. Hearing this, Yi Xian was suddenly in a dilemma. He had a lot of swords now, including a few heaven-grade swords. Of course, his favorite was still the Spirit Elegant Sword. Unfortunately, the grade of the Spirit Elegant Sword was too low. If he used it against an enemy now, it might be destroyed instantly. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. In the end, he chose the Dark Azure Sword. This flying sword was specially made by War Iron for him. It was a flying sword that was used to control and kill enemies. If this spirit became the spirit of the Dark Azure Sword, then his flying sword would become even more terrifying. Next, with the help of the second floor guru, Yi Xian began to put the spirit into the sword. Although the spirit was reluctant, it did not refuse. Fortunately, a year's time passed in the blink of an eye. Purple Flame Pagoda. The Purple Flame Pagoda had a total of 6 floors. Ordinary inner yard students could only cultivate on the upper 3 floors. They could not go down to the lower 3 floors. The Purple Flame Pagoda was huge. The space on each floor was equivalent to a small city. On the south side of the 3rd floor, in a stone cave, a man sat on a stone platform. He was about 21 or 22 years old. He wore a black robe and had shoulder-length hair. This person was one of the inner yard's 4 geniuses, Nan Shan. In front of Nan Shan were Bai Ling, Qin Feng, and the others. Bai Ling said in a low voice, Nan Shan, Yi Xian is not to be underestimated. Nan Shan opened his eyes, of course. According to the report from the Realm Defense Alliance in the Azure world, he was already a sword immortal in the Azure world. By now, he should be even more powerful. As he said this, he looked at Bai Ling and Qin Feng. I only asked you to find out more about him, but you didn't know how to restrain yourselves, especially Xiao Qian. Bai Ling smiled bitterly. At first, they only wanted to find out more about Yi Xian. However, they did not expect Yi Xian to not be easy to deal with. Moreover, they did not expect Yi Xian to be so powerful. Nan Shan suddenly said, he killed Xiao Qian. Did the academy really not punish him? Bai Ling shook her head, no. It must be because of his strength and talent. Nan Shan chuckled, indeed. No one would offend a living genius for the sake of a dead person. Moreover, in the academy, whoever is more talented will be favored by the old guys. However, this time, I want to see if they will choose Yi Xian or me. At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of everyone. The person who had come was the Genesis Master. The Genesis Master glanced at everyone before looking at Nan Shan. You want to find Yi Xian for revenge? Nan Shan smiled, Genesis Master, everyone in the inner courtyard doesn't know that Xiao Qian is my man. Now that he has died at the hands of Yi Xian, if I don't get justice for him, how can I stay in the inner courtyard in the future? The Genesis Master shook his head. The higher-ups want this matter to end here. Nan Shan smiled, impossible. The Genesis Master looked at Nan Shan without saying anything. At this moment, Nan Shan suddenly stood up. The moment he stood up, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from his body. At the same time, the surrounding space trembled and instantly cracked like a spider web. At the same time, a mysterious power suddenly gathered in Nan Shan's hand. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. Even the Genesis Master was stunned. He said with some disbelief, Origin Realm? Above the void-piercing realm was the Origin Realm. In order to reach the Origin Realm, it meant that one had to grasp the origin force of the world. There were various kinds of spiritual energy in the world. Spiritual energy was one, dark energy was another, and origin force was another. Origin force was stronger than spiritual energy and dark energy. Therefore, grasping origin force meant that one had reached the Origin Realm. The Genesis Master's expression was currently solemn. Nan Shan was only 22 years old. A 22-year-old Origin Realm cultivator, this kind of talent could only be described as terrifying. Nan Shan smiled, Qin Feng, help me issue a challenge. Just say that in 3 days, I, Nan Shan, will fight Yi Xian on the pillar of life and death. In this inner courtyard, if he exists, then I will not. Qin Feng said excitedly, all right, I'll go right now. With that, he turned around and disappeared like he was flying. The Genesis Master glanced at Nan Shan, sighed, and turned around to leave. In the square, Nan Shan slowly closed his eyes. He didn't know the exact details of the Realm Defense Alliance's destruction because everyone who was there that day was dead. The only people alive were Yi Xian and a few people from Pale Sword Sect. However, it was impossible for these people to tell him the truth about that day. However, he knew one thing about Dao Yi, and that was that he knew that the Realm Defense Alliance's destruction was related to Yi Xian. There were even rumors that the Pale Sword Sect's master was not dead. No matter what, Yi Xian was a member of Pale Sword Sect, he deserved to die. The news of Nan Shan's challenge quickly spread throughout the inner courtyard. The inner courtyard was bustling with noise and excitement. Within Dao Yi's hall, the Grand Elder sat at the side. In front of him was the Genesis Master and 2 teachers. The Genesis Master said in a low voice, whoever dies will be a loss to our Dao Yi Academy. The Grand Elder looked at the Genesis Master, has he really reached the Origin Realm? The Genesis Master nodded, absolutely. The Grand Elder was silent for a moment, then said, we can't stop it. Both of them are proud people. The more we stop them, the bigger the problem will be. The Genesis Master frowned, then let them fight to the death? The Grand Elder said indifferently, if you don't let them fight to the death, will they give up? The Genesis Master fell silent. At this moment, the old man suddenly said, these two people are like fire and water. Even if we suppress them now, in the future when they fully mature, it won't just be a fight between the two of them. At that time, it will become an internal conflict of our Dao-E Academy. Thus, if we can't mediate, we can only keep one of them alive. Hearing this, everyone nodded. This was just like the imperial family. If two princes were extremely outstanding, the only thing the emperor could do was to keep one of them alive and eliminate the other. If he wasn't eliminated, there would be internal strife. The current battle between Nan Shan and Yi Xian was only in the inner courtyard. But if they fully matured, it would no longer be an inner courtyard battle, but an internal strife. Especially Yi Xian, this fellow was not easy to deal with. If he wanted to act recklessly, they would be worried. At this moment, the Grand Elder suddenly said, if they want to fight, then let them fight. It will also let us see who is more outstanding between the two of them. Of course, there's no need to fight to the death. Victory and defeat are enough. Whoever loses will have to lower their heads and submit. The Genesis Master wanted to say something but stopped. The Grand Elder glanced at him. What do you want to say? The Genesis Master said in a low voice, a 22-year-old Origin Realm cultivator is rare. The Grand Elder said indifferently, isn't a sword immortal less than 20 years old rare? Like I said, I'll let the two of them fight, and whoever loses will lower their heads and submit. The Genesis Master thought about it and nodded. That's the only way. After everyone left, only the Grand Elder was left in the Dao-E Hall. The Grand Elder slowly closed his eyes. In his mind, the scene that he saw outside Dao-E City reappeared, that sword. Even now, he still had lingering fear when he thought of that sword. Qin Feng came to the front of Yi Xian's wooden house. He waved his right hand and a letter of challenge floated in front of Xiao Gu. Tell Yi Xian that in 3 days, Nan Shan will fight him on the life and death pillar. With that, he turned and left. Xiao Gu put away the letter of challenge. He glanced at the wooden house but did not enter. This was because Yi Xian had said that without his permission, no one could enter. Wait. 2 days later, in the prison tower, Yi Xian spent a lot of effort and finally injected the variant spirit into the dark sword. The moment the variant spirit entered the dark sword, it instantly turned blood red. At the same time, a sword hum suddenly resounded through the entire prison tower. Then, the dark sword suddenly rushed into the sky as if it wanted to destroy the prison tower. It was not as if it wanted to destroy the tower. Within the dark sword, countless blood-red sword lights rippled out in all directions, wanting to destroy everything around it. Not far away, Yi Xian's face darkened. I advise you to keep a low profile. However, the dark sword did not care at all. However, its sword qi could not shake the prison tower at all. As such, it flew outside and towards the 3 swords at the top of the tower. As it flew, sword hum continuously rippled out from the sword, provocation. It was provoking the 3 swords at the top of the tower. Chapter 368. Arrogant. That was Yi Xian's first thought. The dark sword had become extremely arrogant. The dark sword was no longer in heaven tier, but he did not know what grade it was. Of course, he was sure that the sword had undergone a tremendous change. However, no matter how powerful it had become, it could not be more powerful than the 3 swords at the top of the tower. The sword had just reached the 3 swords when, buzz. The sword at the top of the tower suddenly trembled. Boom! The dark sword instantly fell from the top of the tower and landed on the ground. On the ground, the dark sword kept trembling. At the same time, there was an anguished wail. It was the voice of the variant spirit. Not far away, Xiao looked coldly at the dark sword. Is it bad to be alive? As she spoke, she glanced at the top of the tower and continued to get her spirit fruit. She was also afraid of the three swords. However, she was smart and would not provoke them on purpose. Yi Xian walked to the dark sword and shook his head. Is it bad to be low-key? The dark sword trembled and floated in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. Being weak now doesn't mean you'll be weak in the future. Know your shame and you'll be brave. Do you understand? The dark sword trembled as if it was replying to something. Yi Xian smiled. He gently stroked the dark sword and said softly, "Second floor master, what's the grade of this sword now?" After a moment of silence, the second floor master said, "Above heaven tier is transcending mortality in entering holiness." To put it simply, only treasures with their own spirit can be called holiness. The sword in your hand is not an ordinary holiness because its spirit is very special. It's a variant spirit. Ordinary holiness cannot compare to it. Yi Xian nodded and looked at the sword in his hand. He had to admit that the difference between this sword and the previous dark sword was like heaven and earth. There was a qualitative change. Ordinary void-piercing realm cultivators were no threat to him at all. It could be said that with this sword, he could now easily kill a void-piercing realm. It should be known that this spirit itself could easily kill the void-piercing realm. Now, together with him, the two united. Even if he encountered a powerhouse at the level of the Great Elder, he also had the power to fight. A moment later, Yi Xian left the World Prison Pagoda. Just as he stepped out of the bamboo house, Xiao Gu handed the written challenge letter to him. Yi Xian was taken aback. "This is?" Xiao Gu said, "Nanshan gave you a letter of challenge. Tomorrow, you will have to fight at the Pillar of Life and Death. A declaration of war." Yi Xian nodded and accepted the letter of challenge. "Is there any news on the two people I asked you to look into?" Xiao Gu nodded. After Anlanxiu and Yi Ling entered the inner academy, the two of them disappeared from everyone's line of sight. The two of them weren't on the third level. According to my guess, if the two of them weren't on the second level, they would have left the academy and gone out to gain experience. The second level? Yi Xian asked. Xiao Gu nodded. The second level is better than the third level. However, the inner academy students can't go up. Even the four great monsters can't go up. Only those special students and some students who have made great contributions can go up. Yi Xian was a little curious. Special students? What kind of students are special? Xiao Gu said in a low voice, people like Yi Ling are special students. When she entered, she wasn't even 14 years old, but she had already reached the void-piercing realm. People like her are gifted and can be considered special students. Yi Xian asked, people like Yi Ling, are they more monstrous than the four great monsters? Xiao Gu smiled bitterly. You can't say that. I can only say that the two types of monsters are fundamentally different. In any case, I personally feel that people like Yi Ling are abnormal, because this is not something an ordinary person can do. However, even the four great geniuses wouldn't dare to provoke Yi Ling, because she's too special. Not only that, the headmaster even personally came out of his seclusion to receive her and took her in as his personal disciple. Yi Xian smiled. He was also very shocked by his little sister's talent. However, it was still fine, because the mysterious woman had said that Yi Ling was special, and this specialness didn't have too many disadvantages. Xiao Gu looked at Yi Xian. Are you confident in the battle with Nan Shan? Yi Xian smiled. I will do my best. Xiao Gu nodded slightly. Nan Shan can become one of the 4 great monsters, his strength is naturally unquestionable. You shouldn't underestimate him. Yi Xian smiled. Good. Xiao Ge nodded, and then retreated. After Xiao Ge left, Yi Xian looked up at the horizon. He still had one thing to do, and that was to reconstruct Yu Qi's body. Naturally, he had not forgotten about this matter. However, because of the prison pagoda, he had not dared to ask the higher-ups of Dao Yi Academy for help. However, he knew that this matter could not be delayed any longer. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian turned around and returned to the wooden hut, then entered the prison pagoda. He wanted to familiarize himself with this new dark sword. Time passed very quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was the 3rd day. The life and death pillar. Where there were people, there would naturally be conflicts. In Dao Yi Academy, if there was a conflict that could not be mediated, then the students could go to the life and death pillar. However, under normal circumstances, it would not escalate to this extent, because the academy would intervene. However, now, the matter between Yi Xian and Nan Shan could no longer be interfered with by the academy. Even if they were to forcefully intervene, it would only cause trouble in the future. Therefore, the academy chose to let it go. Some people had already gathered around the life and death pillar. These people were naturally here to watch the life and death duel between Yi Xian and Nan Shan. On the life and death pillar, Nan Shan stood quietly. His eyes were slightly closed, and his expression was calm. Not far away from him were Bai Ling and the others. On the other side, in a place that everyone couldn't see, there was a group of people watching. This group was the Grand Elder and the others. Wait. They were all waiting for Yi Xian to appear. Yi Xian didn't play any tricks and quickly appeared on the life and death pillar. As soon as Yi Xian appeared, Nan Shan opened his eyes and sized up Yi Xian. How exactly was my Realm Protection Alliance destroyed? Yi Xian smiled. Why don't you guess? Nan Shan stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Is the Firmament Swordmaster really still alive? Yi Xian said with a smile, guess again. The corners of Nan Shan's mouth twitched. The intelligence didn't say that Yi Xian was so despicable. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Nan Shan, the Realm Protection Alliance has been destroyed. The enmity between me and the Realm Protection Alliance is over. It's over? Nan Shan suddenly smiled. I don't think it's over. I will return to the firmament world. The Realm Protection Alliance won't disappear just like that. Before that, I will destroy you and the Firmament Sword sect. Yi Xian nodded. Ambitious. Then come. The corners of Nan Shan's mouth twitched. In the next moment, he took a step forward. The entire life and death pillar shook violently and a shadow charged at Yi Xian. This shadow was Nan Shan. It was so fast that many people couldn't react. The moment Nan Shan disappeared, a sword light suddenly flashed on the life and death pillar. Boom! Before everyone could react, the 2 people on the life and death pillar retreated rapidly. Soon, the 2 of them stopped at the same time. Nan Shan looked at Yi Xian with a smile. As expected of a sword immortal. Come, let's continue. As soon as he spoke, he suddenly raised his right hand. In the next moment, the space around him cracked open, and then countless strands of dark matter energy converged towards his palm like a tide. In next to no time, the life and death pillar trembled violently. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings instantly became solemn when they witnessed this scene. The corners of Nan Shan's mouth twitched. Come, take my palm. As soon as he spoke, he took a step forward and pressed his right hand forward lightly. Crack! Everyone watched as a huge crack appeared in the space in front of Yi Xian and Nan Shan. In next to no time, a strand of powerful dark matter energy swept out from the crack and attacked Yi Xian. On the other side, the the Grand Elder and the others were slightly surprised when they saw this. The Grand Elder said softly, "To be able to use the ability of the void-piercing realm to such an extent, rare, rare." As he spoke, his gaze descended onto Yi Xian. He was quite curious about how Yi Xian would resist this attack. Under the gazes of countless people, Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward, and then he stabbed with his sword. A strand of powerful light surged out from the tip of his sword. Bang! A world-shaking explosion suddenly resounded. The space on the life and death pillar trembled violently while countless strands of light and dark matter energy surged madly towards the surroundings. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and they retreated in succession. Right at this moment, a sword howl suddenly resounded from the life and death pillar. But it didn't take long for a figure to retreat repeatedly, and he'd retreated to the edge of the life and death pillar. It was Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at the heaven-rank sword in his hand. At this moment, the sword had split apart completely, and it had transformed into countless pieces that had fallen to the ground. The sword had been destroyed. The expressions of Xiao Gu and the others instantly became solemn when they witnessed this scene. On the life and death pillar, Yi Xian smiled. The sword had been destroyed, but his sword heart hadn't. Since he'd left the firmament dimension, he'd practically instantly annihilated everyone in the younger generation. At this moment, Nan Shan had told him that he, Yi Xian, wasn't invincible amongst the younger generation. Besides him, Yi Xian, there were numerous other geniuses in this world. Nan Shan gazed at Yi Xian while he slowly clenched his right hand, and a solemn expression could be seen in his eyes. He hadn't underestimated Yi Xian since the beginning, and Yi Xian's strength was much stronger than he'd imagined. After a moment of silence, Nan Shan walked towards Yi Xian. Every single step he took caused his aura to grow slightly stronger. When he arrived just a few meters away from Yi Xian, his aura had far surpassed the void destruction realm, and his aura suddenly rose explosively when he took the final step. Bang! The entire life and death pillar split apart, and a powerful presence surged into the surroundings like a volcanic eruption. The surrounding space began to ripple violently like boiling water. It was an extremely shocking sight. Origin Realm. Countless people in the surroundings were instantly stunned when they witnessed this scene. Nan Shan looked at Yi Xian from the life and death pillar and said calmly, "What are you going to use to fight me? P.S. Please." Chapter 369. The surroundings were completely silent. Many people had not expected Nan Shan to have reached the Origin Realm. It should be pointed out that in the Dao Yi Academy, some of the instructors were only at the Origin Realm. And the instructors of the outer court were only at the void-piercing realm. Yet Nan Shan had reached the Origin Realm at such a young age. It had to be said that his talent could only be described as terrifying. Soon, everyone turned to look at Yi Xian. Nan Shan had already revealed his trump card. What about Yi Xian's? On the life and death pillar, Yi Xian smiled. You've already revealed your trump card. What, you don't want to waste time? Nan Shan smiled. Indeed, I don't want to waste time. Yi Xian, after I deal with you, I will return to the firmament world and form the Realm Defense Alliance. At that time, I will completely destroy the Firmament Sword sect. Unfortunately, you won't live to see that day. With that, he raised his right hand and clenched it into a fist. Crack. The space where his fist was clenched directly cracked. Nan Shan's expression became a little ferocious. He flashed forward and directly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Then, he threw a punch at Yi Xian. As soon as the punch was thrown, the life and death pillar beneath their feet instantly cracked. At the same time, the space around Yi Xian also cracked. Strands of dark matter energy seeped out from the spatial cracks around Yi Xian and swallowed towards Yi Xian. The power of a single punch was terrifying. In front of Nan Shan, Yi Xian opened his right hand. The space around him trembled slightly. Then, a spatial sword instantly condensed. At the same time, the spatial cracks around Yi Xian were instantly repaired. Seeing this scene, the faces of the Grand Elder and the rest changed. This is... The Origin Master stared at Yi Xian. How can he repair space? Impossible. The Grand Elder also stared at Yi Xian. No one knew what he was thinking. After the spatial sword condensed, the two-sword intents suddenly surged into the spatial sword. The next moment, Yi Xian stabbed out. One sword to determine life and death. When the sword stabbed out, boom! In front of everyone's eyes, the life and death pillar at the foot of Yi Xian and Nan Shan, which had already been broken into pieces, instantly turned into dust. At the same time, the two of them frantically retreated. While Yi Xian was retreating, 5 flying swords suddenly flew out from the sword box behind him. Like 5 lightning bolts, they instantly appeared in front of Nan Shan. Nan Shan's pupils constricted slightly when he saw the 5 flying swords. He suddenly slapped his hands behind him, and the powerful force caused him to forcefully stop. Subsequently, he pressed his hands together, stomped his right foot down, and spread his hands apart. Defend! With that, a black round shield appeared in front of him. Bam bam bam, Yi Xian's 5 flying swords were forcibly blocked by this round shield, but in the next moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him, and then a sword slashed straight at him. Boom! The round shield instantly shattered, and Nan Shan retreated rapidly. However, before he could take a few steps back, several swords suddenly flashed out from the space around him. Instant space sword. Seeing this scene, Nan Shan's expression changed greatly. At this moment, he didn't dare to hold back, and he slapped his hands towards his waist. Zhang destruction. Boom! The space within Nan Shan's zhang collapsed in an instant, and everything shattered along with Yi Xian's swords. Soon, the space returned to normal, and at this moment, Nan Shan's face was incomparably pale, without a trace of blood. But Yi Xian had already appeared in front of him. Just at this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Nan Shan. Great Elder. Yi Xian stopped and smiled slightly. Great Elder, what do you mean by this? The Great Elder said softly, you win. Yi Xian said with a smile, he said that I won't be there if he dies, and he dies if I die. The Great Elder looked at Yi Xian. Give the old man some face and spare his life, how about it? Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then said, he will take revenge on me in the future. The Great Elder said, he won't. If he dares to act against you, then the old man will definitely take his life. As soon as he finished speaking, he just looked at Yi Xian and waited for Yi Xian's answer. Yi Xian smiled. I will definitely give face to the Great Elder. However, his spatial rings belong to me. The Great Elder turned to look at Nan Shan. Nan Shan fell silent for a moment before he tapped with his finger, and the 2 spatial rings on him flew over to Yi Xian. Yi Xian frowned slightly when he saw this. This fellow is quite sensible. He actually didn't resist at all. He didn't think too much about it, and he glanced at the 2 spatial rings. There were over 300,000 violet origin crystals within them. Besides that, there were 9 heaven-rank treasures, and some miscellaneous items. Yi Xian put the spatial rings away, and then he looked at the Great Elder and smiled. Great Elder, I'll be leaving first. The Great Elder hesitated for a moment, and then he tapped with his finger, and a spatial ring fell in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at it, and there were 2 high-grade heaven-rank swords within it. Yi Xian was stunned. The Great Elder said, the old man doesn't use swords, so these swords should be of some use to you. Yi Xian knew that the Great Elder had done this because he had let Nan Shan go. He didn't stand on ceremony, and he picked up the swords with a smile. "Thank you, great elder." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Nearby, Xiao Gu, Li Chuan, and the others hurriedly rushed over. Yi Xian smiled. "Come on, let's go celebrate." Xiao Gu and the others laughed, and it didn't take long for Yi Xian and the others to vanish into the distance. On the other hand, Bai Ling and the others behind Nan Shan had extremely unsightly expressions on their faces. The great elder turned to look at Nan Shan, who had remained silent. "Are you unwilling?" Nan Shan didn't speak. The great elder said softly, "You have just reached the origin realm, and you haven't even grasped the slightest bit of source power, and your most lethal move was the last Zhang annihilation you used to protect yourself. It's just that you didn't expect that you would be forced to use this trump card to protect yourself." Nan Shan said softly, "I'm a little unwilling." The great elder shook his head. "Look at him from another angle, maybe you'll be willing. That sword skill of his is no weaker than your Zhang annihilation, and his sword is very strange. In the last move that defeated you, he was able to silently integrate those swords into the space, and then use the power of space to activate these swords. It can be said that his use of the power of space is even stronger than some void-piercing realm powerhouses." As he spoke, he looked at Nan Shan. "Other than that, he didn't use his trump card, right?" Hearing this, Nan Shan's expression suddenly changed slightly. Did Yi Xian use his full strength? If he asked himself, he shouldn't have. The great elder said again, "Nan Shan, within 3 years, you can't find trouble with him. If you do, the old man will take your life, and after 3 years, it may be two extremes, either you don't find trouble with him, or you don't dare to find trouble with him. And before that, you can't find him without permission." As he finished speaking, he turned and left. In the same place, Nan Shan was silent. And next to him, Source also walked over. He whispered, "If you truly control Source power, you may be able to defeat him, but before that, you still can't. This person's sword skills, even I have to be careful. If you find him privately, you will die without a doubt." As he finished speaking, he turned and left. After a moment of silence, Nan Shan turned and left. Inside Yi Xian's house, Yi Xian, Li Chuan, and Guqiu sat around the table. During the meal, Xiao Gu sighed. The great elder suddenly intervened. "It's really unfair." Yi Xian smiled slightly, not saying anything. Xiao Gu looked at Yi Xian. "Brother Yi, you're not angry?" Yi Xian smiled. "Angry about what?" Xiao Gu said in a low voice, "Endless trouble." Yi Xian smiled. "If I can defeat him once, I can defeat him a second time." Actually, he also wanted to kill Nan Shan, to eliminate any future troubles. But, he was very clear, if he really did that, it was equivalent to slapping the great elder's face in front of everyone. And if he really did not give the great elder any face, and wanted to kill Nan Shan, the great elder would definitely intervene. At that time, his situation would become terrible. On the contrary, if he let Nan Shan live, he would obtain many benefits. And as for this future trouble, as he said, if he, Yi Xian, was strong enough, he could kill Nan Shan once, he could kill him 100 times, 1,000 times. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly stood up, to the Purple Flame Pagoda. Purple Flame Pagoda? Xiao Gu and the others looked at Yi Xian. For what? Cultivation? Yi Xian smiled. To take over Nanshan's territory. From now on, Nanshan's territory is ours. Hearing this, everyone was stunned, then overjoyed. It should be known that Nanshan occupied a better area in the 3rd floor. If they could get Nanshan's territory, then they would be able to cultivate better in the future. Soon, Yi Xian led everyone to the Purple Flame Pagoda. After entering the Purple Flame Pagoda, Yi Xian immediately felt an abundant spiritual energy. This spiritual energy was a little hot, a little overbearing. Yi Xian brought Xiao Gu and the others to Nanshan's territory, but at this moment, Nanshan was no longer there. When Bai Ling and the others saw Yi Xian and the others, their faces changed. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Guys, this place is mine now." Bai Ling and the others' faces were a little ugly, but no one dared to resist. Soon, Bai Ling and the others turned and left. At this time, Xiaogu smiled, "If I can cultivate here every day, at most 3 years, I can also reach the origin realm." Confidence. Xiao Ji's words were full of confidence. Yi Xian glanced at the people around him. These were all geniuses, their future achievements will certainly not be low. Thinking of this, an idea suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's mind. He turned to look at Xiaogu. "Brother Xiao, how many inner court students do you know?" Xiaogu looked at Yi Xian. "You want to gather these people?" Yi Xian nodded. "Can I?" Xiaogu thought for a moment, then nodded. "Of course you can. Because every once in a while, the academy will give us a mission, and at that time, if we have more people, it will be very advantageous. Moreover, in this inner court, we will not be bullied by others with more people." Yi Xian said with a smile, "This area should be able to accommodate a lot of people. Help me contact people, see if there is anyone who is willing to join us. Of course, those with bad moral character will not be accepted." Xiaogu said with a smile, "Okay." Saying this, he seemed to think of something, and asked, "Since you want to form a group, then think of a name." Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, "Let's call it Xiao Men. In this world, only I am outstanding." Chapter 370. Xiao Men. In fact, it could be said that Yi Xian had founded the Xiao Men on a whim. After seeing Xiaogu and the others around him, Yi Xian knew that they were different from the students of Dao Yi Academy. It was difficult for the students of Dao Yi Academy to keep up with his pace, but Xiaogu and the others were different. These people were truly monstrous. Their future achievements might not be lower than Yi Xian's. There was definitely no harm in making more friends in the outside world. Yi Xian now controlled Nanshan's territory. Coupled with the fact that he had defeated Nanshan, his reputation in the inner courtyard could be said to be very high. In the inner courtyard, if these geniuses wanted to follow you willingly, they had to meet 2 criteria. The first was strength, and the second was benefits. Yi Xian met both criteria, so Xiaogu pulled in a few more people. Now, Yi Xian's Xiao Men had a total of 9 members. The weakest was at the void-piercing realm. No, except for Yi Xian. In the stone cave, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on a praying mat. Around him was extremely dense purple fire energy. This energy was indeed much better than ordinary spiritual energy. At this moment, he also knew why so many people wanted to enter the inner courtyard of Dao Yi Academy. Because cultivating in here was indeed several times faster than cultivating in the outside world. This also made Yi Xian want to break through to the void-piercing realm. His previous battle with Nanshan had been very taxing for him. If he had not used the Sword of Space, he would not have been able to defeat Nanshan at all. An expert at Nanshan's realm could easily destroy his heaven-grade sword. Moreover, Nanshan had clearly just reached the origin realm. Otherwise, even if he used the Sword of Space, it would be difficult for him to defeat his opponent. The difference in realm. His biggest problem now was that his realm was too low. To break through to the void-piercing realm, just the energy in the purple flame pagoda was not enough. He still needed swords. Moreover, they needed heaven-grade swords, and the number could not be small. Yi Xian checked his current financial situation. He now had a total of 9 heaven-grade swords, and about 1.6 million purple source crystals. A high-grade heaven-tier sword was worth around 30,000 purple origin crystals. In other words, with his current wealth, he could buy dozens of swords. But his intuition told him that it might not be enough. As his realm increased, his demand for swords became higher and higher, both in terms of quantity and quality. This made him very distressed. Now, every time he broke through, it meant that he needed a huge amount of wealth. Poor. At the thought of breaking through to the void-piercing realm, Yi Xian felt extremely poor. Make money. He had to make money. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian found Xiao Gu and asked, "You told me before that there are purple fire crystals in this purple fire pagoda?" Xiao Gu nodded. Under the violet flame pagoda, there is a passage called the Violet Flame Path. In the depths of the Violet Flame Path, there are violet fire crystals, but it is very dangerous. Dangerous? Yi Xian asked, "How dangerous?" Xiao Gu said in a deep voice, "There is fire poison in the purple flame path. The deeper you go, the stronger the fire poison. This fire poison is too overbearing. Even people like us can only last for a quarter of an hour." Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then asked, "Are these violet fire crystals very precious?" Xiao Gu smiled bitterly, "Very precious. If it is exchanged for violet origin crystals, it can be said that one violet fire crystal can be exchanged for 100 violet origin crystals. This is because the violet fire crystal contains a lot of energy, several times that of ordinary violet origin crystals." Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, "I want to go to the violet flame path." Xiao Gu was taken aback, "You want violet fire crystals?" Yi Xian nodded, "I'm a little tight on money." "This chapter is not over, please turn the page," Xiao Gu said in a deep voice, "That place is really dangerous. Even the Great Elder and the others cannot infiltrate." Yi Xian smiled, "Don't worry, if I can't hold on, I will retreat. I will not risk my life." Xiao Gu nodded, "Then be careful." Yi Xian nodded slightly, then followed Xiao Gu to the violet flame path. After arriving at the entrance of the violet flame path, Xiao Gu turned and left. Yi Xian glanced at the violet flame path, which was bright red and bottomless. Yi Xian was a little hesitant, because he felt a heat wave at the entrance, and there was a trace of something else in this heat wave that made him very uncomfortable. He knew that this should be the fire poison. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian walked in. At the same time, his sword intent began to spread out, which began to protect his surroundings. With this sword intent, the fire poison was immediately blocked. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was delighted. His sword intent could really block the fire poison. Yi Xian quickened his pace. After walking for about half an hour, Yi Xian's expression gradually turned serious, because he found that the fire poison was getting stronger and stronger as he went down. It was so strong that his sword intent was almost unable to withstand it. However, he could still persevere. Yi Xian continued to walk down, and soon, he found some violet fire crystals in the surrounding passageways. These violet fire crystals were the size of a fist, completely red, as if there were flames burning, and contained an extremely pure energy. Unfortunately, there were not many of them, only a dozen or so. Too few. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. Yi Xian put it away and continued to walk down the violet flame path as if there was no end. After another hour, Yi Xian stopped because at this moment, the sword intent around him had actually begun to corrode. "I can't continue." He really wanted to continue because the deeper he went, the more violet fire crystals there were. Until now, he had already obtained nearly 1,000 violet fire crystals. However, he was very clear that he couldn't continue because if he did, the fire poison would enter his body, and then he would be in big trouble. Fire poison? Yi Xian suddenly froze. Fire poison? Didn't he have the chaotic energy? At this moment, Yi Xian thought of the chaotic energy. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment on the spot, and then he opened his palm. A strand of chaotic energy appeared at the center of his palm. As soon as this strand of chaotic energy appeared, the fire poison around him actually retreated swiftly, and it wasn't long before all the fire poison around him had vanished. Yi Xian was overjoyed when he saw this. The chaotic energy was really the bane of the poison. With the chaotic energy, Yi Xian no longer had any worries and continued to walk down. This time, he sped up, and at the same time, he removed the violet fire crystals on the walls on both sides of the violet flame path. I've made a killing. Yi Xian's speed grew faster and faster. Around 2 hours later, he had already collected over 3,000 violet fire crystals, which was equivalent to 300,000 violet genesis crystals. The further down he went, the more violet fire crystals there were. Therefore, Yi Xian continued to walk down. Around half an hour later, Yi Xian, who was collecting violet fire crystals, suddenly stopped. He lifted his head and saw a man in white standing nearby. The man was around 20 years old and wore a white robe. At his waist was a sheathed saber. The man in white held the saber hilt in his left hand as he stood there silently. Yi Xian noticed that the man in white was resisting the fire poison. Saber gleam. There was a thin barrier around the man in white. This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. The thin saber gleam was blocking the fire poison in the surroundings. Yi Xian's expression turned solemn when he saw this. The man was using the fire poison to cultivate. Most importantly, the man was able to rely on the saber gleam to reach this point. How powerful! At this moment, the man in white suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian. When he saw Yi Xian, he was slightly taken aback and a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. You are? Yi Xian smiled. Yi Xian. The man in white shook his head. Never heard of you. Yi Xian smiled. I just entered the inner court. The man in white nodded slightly and looked at Yi Xian. How did you get here? Yi Xian opened his palm and a sword appeared in it. Swordsman? The man in white asked. Yi Xian nodded. Swordsman. After saying that, he continued to walk forward in a very relaxed manner. The man in white was stunned when he saw this. Soon, his expression turned solemn. Brother Yi, why are you walking so easily? Aren't you afraid of the fire poison? Yi Xian stopped and smiled. It's just fire poison. What's there to be afraid of? You still need to work hard. The man in white said, Brother Ye's strength. I admire you. Yi Xian smiled. What's your name? The man in white said, Ming Kuan. Yi Xian said, Brother Ming Kuan, I'll be leaving first. After saying that, he continued to walk forward. Ming Kuan's expression became extremely solemn as he watched Yi Xian disappear into the distance. So powerful. As he said that, his gaze gradually became determined. Then, he continued to walk forward, but very slowly. In the distance, Yi Xian walked as he collected violet fire crystals. The further he went, the more fire poison there was and the more terrifying it became. It was so terrifying that even Yi Xian felt fearful. If it were not for the chaotic qi, the fire poison would have taken his life in an instant. Let alone him, even Origin Realm experts would probably be killed instantly if they inhaled a single breath of the air. Yi Xian thought about it and continued to walk forward. There were a lot of violet fire crystals, and they were of very good quality. Although there was chaotic energy, Yi Xian still did not dare to be careless, because the deeper he went, the more he felt that this place was not simple. Perhaps even the Grand Elder and the others in the academy had not gone so deep. Roughly an hour later, Yi Xian stopped. There was a whirlpool not far away from him. The whirlpool was filled with magma that was bubbling. He even saw some violet fire crystals in the whirlpool. They were as big as watermelons. Yi Xian said, God on the second floor, is there any danger in there? The god on the second floor said indifferently, won't you know if you try? Yi Xian's face darkened. What was he talking about? Go and try. What if it's gone? After that, no matter what he asked, the god on the second floor did not respond. In the end, Yi Xian had no choice but to rely on himself. He walked over. As soon as he walked over, the whirlpool suddenly trembled violently. Then, a powerful force directly swept Yi Xian in. At this moment, Xiaoling's voice suddenly rang in Yi Xian's head, "Danger, couldn't you have said it earlier?" This was Yi Xian's final cry. "You didn't ask me either. P.S. If you have a ticket, keep it for now. I'll give you a ticket when I explode." End of this chapter. Chapter 371. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian felt as if his head was filled with lead, extremely heavy. As if he had thought of something, he suddenly sat up. At this moment, he was in a pool of magma, and there was a thin blue light around him. It was this blue light that blocked the magma around him. The god on the second floor had made a move. At this moment, the voice of the god on the second floor suddenly sounded, "Be careful, this place is not simple." Yi Xian asked, "Where is this?" The god on the second floor said, "There is an unknown existence in the depths of this purple flame pagoda. Be careful." Unknown existence. Yi Xian frowned slightly and was about to speak, but at this moment, there was a sudden tremor not far from him. "Hide!" the god on the second floor suddenly said. Hearing this, Yi Xian hurriedly used the chaotic qi to hide himself. Soon, Yi Xian saw the two men on fire not far away from him. The two men on fire glanced around and found nothing. Soon, the two men on fire turned around and left. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "What is that?" The god on the second floor said, "Fire spirit man, a spiritual creature born from magma. It can only survive in magma." Yi Xian glanced into the distance. He thought about it and finally decided not to continue forward. Although he wanted to take a look, his intuition told him that it was very dangerous ahead. It was better not to go. Curiosity killed people. Just as Yi Xian was about to leave, a voice suddenly sounded in his mind, "Go over." It was not the voice of the god on the second floor. It was the voice of the mysterious person on the fourth floor. "Why?" Yi Xian asked. The mysterious person said, "Dao Law." Dao Law. Yi Xian fell silent. He knew that there were only two ways for those imprisoned in the pagoda to come out. The first was to shatter the seal, and the second was to find the Dao Law and unlock the seal. The mysterious person on the fourth floor had always hoped that he would die. That way, she would be able to come out directly if the prison pagoda collapsed. Now, she obviously wanted to take the second path. Yi Xian shook his head, "It's dangerous." The mysterious man said indifferently, "If you go, I'll help you condense the second Dao Law sword." Yi Xian said solemnly, "I can look for Guru on the second floor." The mysterious person said, "Although she can, she is at a critical moment right now. She won't ruin her plan for you." Yi Xian was silent. The mysterious man continued, "Other than that, I can also help your master reconstruct his physical body." Hearing this, Yi Xian was a little tempted. "Reconstruct Yu Qi's body." Meanwhile, the mysterious man continued, "It'll be beneficial to you if you find the Dao Laws. Of course, you can forget about it if you're really unwilling." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "I don't dare guarantee that I'll definitely be able to obtain the fourth level of the Dao Laws." The mysterious person said, "If you try your best, even if you can't get it now, I will still fulfill the conditions I promised you." Yi Xian nodded. "All right, I'll try my best." After that, he slowly snuck into the distance. Yi Xian was extremely vigilant towards this unknown place, especially since there were Dao Laws here. According to his past experience, places with Dao Laws weren't good places. As he walked, Yi Xian was suddenly stunned because he noticed that there were numerous violet fire crystals in the magma. These violet fire crystals were huge, and the energy they contained was extremely shocking. Yi Xian was overjoyed. He hurriedly put the violet fire crystals away. Just like that, it didn't take long for him to collect nearly 10,000 violet origin crystals. If they were converted into violet origin crystals, it would be 1 million. Not long after, Yi Xian suddenly stopped because he saw a city in the magma not far away. A city that was situated in the magma. Yi Xian snuck over silently and arrived before the city gate. There were 3 words above the gate: Skyfire City. Skyfire City? Yi Xian was silent for a while before he entered the city. The city was very deserted, with only occasional flaming figures floating around. Yi Xian cautiously moved forward. Soon, he arrived in front of a palace. In front of the palace, there were 2 flaming figures quietly guarding it. The strength of these 2 flaming figures was at the void-piercing realm. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he quietly snuck into the palace. The palace was empty, very spacious. Yi Xian looked not far away and saw a woman sitting there. The woman was about 16 or 17 years old and wore a dress that seemed to be condensed from flames. She sat there quietly with her eyes closed, and there was not the slightest bit of aura coming from her. Upon closer inspection, Yi Xian found that the woman was very beautiful. She had curved eyebrows, exquisite facial features and a tall jade nose. The beauty of the woman in front of him did not lose to any woman he had seen before. Yi Xian walked in front of the woman. The woman's hair seemed to be condensed from flames and was very breathtaking. Yi Xian said in a low voice in his heart, "The guy on the 4th floor, the Tao Law is on her." The mysterious man on the 4th floor suddenly said. Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, "It's with her?" The mysterious man said, "Kill her and you can obtain the Tao Law." Kill her? Yi Xian looked at the woman in front of him and frowned. The mysterious man on the 4th floor suddenly said, "What are you hesitating for?" Yi Xian shook his head, "Not killing her." "Why?" the mysterious man asked. Yi Xian said indifferently, "I have no enmity with her. Why should I kill her?" The mysterious man chuckled with a hint of sarcasm in his laughter. "What, you want to be a good person now?" Yi Xian shook his head, "It's not that I want to be a good person. It's just that I have no enmity with her. Why should I kill her?" The mysterious woman smiled and said, "The weak are prey to the strong. This is the law of this world." Yi Xian nodded, "You're right. However, I still can't do it." Yi Xian had never thought of himself as a good person. However, Yi Xian always had his own bottom line. He would never cross that bottom line. Meanwhile, the mysterious woman said, "The Tao Law is on her. If you don't kill her, how will you obtain the Tao Law? If you don't obtain the Tao Law, how will you become stronger? If you don't obtain the Tao Law, how will you save your master, Yu Qi?" Yi Xian fell silent when he heard that. He would be able to obtain the Tao Law if he killed the woman before him. Obtaining the Tao Law meant that he would be able to condense a second Tao Law and reconstruct Yu Qi's body. However, he really couldn't kill her just like that. After a short while, Yi Xian suddenly shook his head and smiled, "Killing a person and obtaining countless benefits. However, I can't feel at ease. I won't do it." As soon as he finished speaking, he took 2 steps back. However, at this moment, a sword howl suddenly resounded from within his body. It was the sword at the center of the pagoda. The sword trembled, and then a ray of light suddenly flashed out from within it and entered Yi Xian's body. As soon as this ray of light entered his body, Yi Xian's body trembled violently. In the next moment, a powerful strand of sword qi instantly spread throughout his entire body. At the same time, the scene before his eyes suddenly changed. At this moment, he was in a boundless gray world. Yi Xian raised his head and looked over. There was a blurry figure standing high in the sky not too far away from him. The figure's back was facing him, so he couldn't see its true appearance clearly. Moreover, there was a similarly blurry little fellow sitting on the figure's shoulder, and the little fellow's head was resting on the figure's head. Yi Xian was just about to speak when a voice suddenly resounded from the horizon. A man must repay kindness and take revenge for enmity. If there's enmity, then so what if I annihilate the entire universe? However, one must never forget one's original intentions and go against one's heart. Since you're able to stick to your heart and gain the acknowledgement of my sword, then that's fate. As he spoke, the figure suddenly waved his right hand lightly, and a ray of light descended from the sky. It didn't take long for the ray of light to enter the space between Yi Xian's brows. In next to no time, strands of information surged into Yi Xian's mind like tidewater. At the same time, the voice resounded once more. I learned this sword technique when I was young, and it's been with me ever since. However, it's slightly lacking now, so I've improved it slightly. Remember, this sword technique follows one's heart. If one's thoughts go against one's will, then draw the sword and slash the heavens and the earth. If I draw my sword, then even the heavens can slash it. As soon as the voice resounded, the figure gradually became illusory. Below, Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly asked. "Senior, you're?" At this moment, the figure had completely vanished. At the same time, the scene before Yi Xian's eyes warped, and it didn't take long for him to return to the hall. At this moment, a sword technique had appeared in his mind. At this moment, the mysterious woman on the fourth floor suddenly sighed softly. "Did you save this universe in your previous life? Or did you save some peerless almighty? Why do you have such dog*t luck?" Yi Xian, the mysterious woman on the fourth floor said again, "Are you sure you don't want this Tao law?" Yi Xian smiled, and just as he was about to speak, the flaming woman in front of him suddenly opened her eyes. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly retreated. In his heart, he asked, "This fellow actually woke up?" The mysterious woman on the fourth floor didn't speak. At this moment, the god on the second floor suddenly said, "She's always been awake." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Fourth floor, why didn't you tell me?" The fourth floor didn't speak. At this moment, Yi Xian knew. This fellow on the fourth floor didn't have good intentions at all. If he really made a move, he would probably be dead by now. And the other party wanted to use the flaming woman in front of him to take his life. This mysterious woman on the fourth floor was really King Evil. Yi Xian and the flaming woman pulled a large distance apart, and the flaming woman just looked at him without saying a word. However, Yi Xian sensed a formless oppressive force. Strong, really strong. This fellow in front of him was definitely not someone he could fight against now. But fortunately, the other party didn't directly make a move. The flaming woman just looked at Yi Xian calmly. "Why didn't you listen to her and directly make a move against me?" Hearing this, Yi Xian was instantly stunned. What the hell? How did this fellow know about my conversation with the mysterious woman on the fourth floor? The other party knew about the prison pagoda? Thinking of this, Yi Xian instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Who the hell was this fellow? The flaming woman stared at Yi Xian. "Answer me." Yi Xian forced himself to calm down. He said in a deep voice, "As I said earlier, I have no enmity with you, and I don't want to kill you." The flaming woman stared at Yi Xian without saying a word. Meanwhile, Yi Xian hurriedly asked in his heart, "God on the second floor, how did she know what I said to the bad woman on the fourth floor?" After a moment of silence, the god on the second floor said, "She should be that Tao law." There was a solemn tone in his voice. Yi Xian. Chapter 372. Tao Law? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. At this moment, the flaming lady in front of him suddenly looked at Yi Xian. After a while, she frowned slightly. Yi Xian hesitated for a while and asked softly, "What's wrong?" The flaming lady said calmly, "Logically speaking, this tower will not choose you. Although your talent is not bad, you are not worthy of this tower. Only those who possess the karmic luck of the world can obtain the acknowledgement of this pagoda." At this moment, the mysterious woman on the fourth floor suddenly chuckled and said, "Do you think this tower is interested in him? It is just trying to ride on someone's coattails." Yi Xian's face darkened. The coattails this bad woman was talking about must be the woman in the plain dress. The flaming lady looked at Yi Xian's abdomen for a long time. In the end, she frowned slightly and said, "This tower's seal should have been broken long ago. Someone strengthened the tower's seal. Was it her?" The mysterious woman on the fourth floor said calmly, "Who else could it be?" The flaming lady glanced at Yi Xian and fell silent. At this moment, the mysterious woman on the fourth floor suddenly said, "Yan Jia, as the supreme Tao law of heaven and earth, you have been trapped in this tower with us for nearly 10,000 years. Now, there is a great opportunity to change your fate in front of you. If you do not seize it, you will regret it in the future." The flaming lady said calmly, "Kill him? Take over the tower?" Yi Xian was speechless. The mysterious woman on the fourth floor said, "Of course. This person is so weak, how can he deserve such a treasure? If you kill him, you can get the treasure easily." Yi Xian's face was extremely dark. This woman was not just a normal kind of bad. The flaming lady suddenly chuckled and said, "Jian Zizai, you have a good heart. If I kill him, the tower's seal will be broken and you can come out, right? Jian Zizai." Yi Xian nodded slightly. So this woman was called Jian Zizai. It should be Jian Vicious. Jian Zizai smiled and said, "If you kill him, it will be beneficial for everyone, right?" Yan Jia said calmly, "If I kill him, you will be free. However, I will have to bear this karma." "Your plan is very good." Jian Zizai sneered. "No matter what, you're the supreme law of heaven and earth, yet you're so timid when doing things. Can't you have some ambition?" Yan Jia smiled and said, "If he really did as you said and attacked me, then I would have killed him. However, he did not make a move. Just as he said, I have no enmity with him, so why should I kill him?" Jian Zizai didn't say anything. Actually, from the moment she instigated Yi Xian to kill, she was very clear that if Yi Xian did not make the first move, Yanjia would not make a move against Yi Xian. Because Yi Xian had been acknowledged by the World Prison Pagoda, from a certain perspective, he could be said to be the master of these Tao laws within the pagoda. Of course, Yi Xian was relatively weak right now. It was impossible for him to make these Tao laws submit to him. However, these Tao laws would not actively harm him. However, if it was Yi Xian who made the first move, then it would be a different story. What she did not expect was that Yi Xian actually did not make a move. Even in the face of so many temptations, he did not make a move. But now, it was meaningless to say anything. The fourth floor was completely silent. Outside the World Prison Pagoda, Yanjia looked at Yi Xian. My duty was to seal her. However, the pagoda was heavily damaged and the Tao laws were scattered. The seal was broken, and I and the other Tao laws were scattered throughout the star field. At this point, she paused and said, I can't return to the pagoda for now. Can't return to the pagoda for now. Yi Xian nodded. It's okay. Whether you return or not is your freedom. As for the Tao laws within the World Prison Pagoda, Yi Xian had never thought that they belonged to him, Yi Xian. Yanjia glanced at Yi Xian and nodded slightly. You must be careful of Jian Zizai. This chapter is not over. Please continue. It's simple. Yi Xian nodded. I know. She's very bad. As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, why was she imprisoned in the pagoda? Yanjia was silent. Yi Xian softly said, can't you tell me? Yanjia said, she was too strong. Too strong? Yi Xian was startled and then asked, she was imprisoned because she was too strong? Yanjia nodded. Yi Xian hesitated and then said, there's nothing wrong with being too strong. Yanjia shook her head. There's nothing wrong with being too strong. It's those people who were wrong. They wanted to enter the fifth dimension, so they were imprisoned. At this point, she paused and then said, it's just that I never expected to encounter those three tough people. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, the three swords at the top of the pagoda? Yanjia nodded. Yi Xian then asked, were they very strong? Yanjia looked at Yi Xian. Don't ask questions that will make people doubt your intelligence. Yi Xian, at this time, Yanjia suddenly said, even if their strength is heaven-defying and they almost destroyed the pagoda, they can't enter the fifth dimension. Why? Yi Xian hurriedly asked. Yanjia smiled and did not speak. Yi Xian was about to speak when Yanjia suddenly said, you should go. We'll meet again when we're free. Yi Xian nodded. As if thinking of something, he hurriedly said, Senior, can you help me with a small matter? Yanjia looked at Yi Xian. What is it? Yi Xian said, help my teacher reconstruct a fleshly body. As he spoke, he took out Yuqi's soul. Yanjia looked at Yuqi's soul. After a moment of silence, she said, I need some things. You have to get them for me. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, what things? Yanjia said, soul wood, heart-protecting lotus, sculpted spirit flower. These three are the main things. Yi Xian nodded. I'll look for them after I leave. Yanjia said, leave her soul here. I'll help her nurture it first. Yi Xian said, okay. Then I'll have to trouble Senior. After speaking, he gave Yuqi's soul to Yanjia and left the hall. Yanjia looked in the direction Yi Xian had left. No one knew what she was thinking. Yi Xian returned to the purple flame path. He said in a deep voice, Great God from the second floor, why didn't she leave that place? After a moment of silence, the second floor god said, she's using the fire poison in that place to heal. Heal? Yi Xian was slightly startled. She's also injured? Nonsense. The second floor god said, this pagoda was heavily damaged in the past. Who wasn't affected? It's just that some are lighter and some are heavier. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, if these Tao laws return to this pagoda in the future, and I'm not very strong, other than death, do you have any other choice? The second floor god suddenly said. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Now, he gradually realized that this world prison pagoda was becoming more and more complicated. With such a treasure, if he didn't have comparable strength, he could only wait for death as the second floor god had said. Strength. He had to have great strength. Brother Yi? At this moment, a voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Yi Xian looked up and saw a man standing not far in front of him. It was the man he had met before. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. It was Ming Kun. Ming Kun looked behind Yi Xian and said, has Yi Xian reached the end? Yi Xian thought for a while and smiled, no, but I'm a little tired today. I don't want to leave. I'll leave another day. Ming Kun's eyes were filled with admiration. Brother Ye's strength is admirable. Admirable. Yi Xian smiled, just as so. Ming Kun shook his head, Brother Yi is too humble. Yi Xian changed the topic, Brother Ming Kun, do you want to continue or? Ming Kun hesitated for a while and smiled bitterly, I think this is my limit. So, I'll go with Brother Yi. Yi Xian smiled, we're going the same way. Just like that, the two walked together. On the way, Ming Kun walked very slowly because he had to resist the fire poison. Yi Xian walked very casually because the fire poison didn't dare to approach him. Every time he saw the fire poison leave Yi Xian, Ming Kun was in awe. Yi Xian spoke abruptly, "Brother Ming Kun, have you joined any organizations?" Ming Kun shook his head, "I like to be alone." Yi Xian was delighted in his heart, and he hurriedly said, "I've established the Virtue School. Brother Ming Kun, are you interested in joining it? We can chat and discuss the martial Dao together." Ming Kun was slightly hesitant. Meanwhile, Yi Xian said, "Even though it's quiet to cultivate alone, it's like building a cart behind closed doors. If we discuss it together, then perhaps we'll obtain unexpected gains." Ming Kun glanced at Yi Xian. "Brother Yi, are you willing to discuss your attainments in the martial Dao with others?" Yi Xian smiled, "Yes. Of course, it's only limited to our own people, like friends and brothers." Ming Kun thought for a moment and said, "All right, I'll join." Yi Xian was overjoyed when he heard this. Ming Kun's strength was absolutely not inferior to Nan Shan. Because Ming Kun's ability to rely on his strength to travel so far on the violet flame path was sufficient to explain everything. With the addition of Ming Kun, the strength of the Virtue School would definitely increase greatly. In next to no time, the two of them left the violet flame path, and Xiao Gu and the others were waiting at the exit. Xiao Gu and the others heaved sighs of relief when they saw Yi Xian, and they were stunned when they saw Ming Kun. Yi Xian led Ming Kun over to Xiao Gu and the others, and he smiled as he said, "This is Brother Ming Kun. I just got to know him. From now on, he's a member of our Virtue School." Everyone was stunned once more when they heard this. "A member of the Virtue School?" Xiao Gu looked at Yi Xian, "Are you sure?" Yi Xian nodded, "Of course I'm sure." "Why?" Xiao Gu hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "Brother Yi, do you know who he is?" Yi Xian shook his head. Xiao Gu smiled and said, "He's one of the 4 great monstrous geniuses of the inner court, Ming Kun." The 4 great monstrous geniuses. Yi Xian smiled. In fact, he had already guessed it. Ming Kun suddenly said, "What 4 great monstrous geniuses?" "We dare to call ourselves monstrous geniuses in the inner court, but if we go out, we are nothing." He paused for a moment, and then he glanced at Yi Xian. "Of course, Brother Yi, you can be called a monstrous genius wherever you go." Yi Xian said, "Brother Ming Kun, do you mean that there are more monstrous geniuses than the inner court out there?" Ming Kun smiled bitterly, "Many. The never-ending starfield is divided into the southern region, the northern region, and the heaven region. Our Dao E Academy belongs to the northern region. The true geniuses of the never-ending starfield are in the heaven region. Even the southern region is much more powerful than here." Then he looked out of the violet flame tower and said softly, "If you can't leave a word on the Dao pillar of the heaven region, how can you call yourself a monstrous genius? P.S. Everyone can leave a comment to see how many fans you have." End of this chapter. Chapter 373. Dao Pillar? Hearing this, everyone looked at Ming Kun. Ming Kun nodded. In the distant heaven region, there is a Dao Pillar. No one knows the origin of this Dao Pillar, but they know that it contains a supreme Dao. Only those who can leave their names on it are truly monstrous. He glanced at the crowd and smiled bitterly. Until now, only 3 people from the northern region have managed to leave their names on it. One of them is the founder of the Dao E Academy, Dean Mu. Mu Dao E. Everyone's expression turned solemn. To them, Mu Dao E was a legend. Ming Kun continued, "Our Dao E Academy is not bad in the northern region, but in the southern region and the heaven region." At this point, he didn't continue. Everyone understood what he meant. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Why should we belittle ourselves? If others are stronger than us, that's a good thing. It proves that we still have room to grow and we have a goal to pursue. Then, he patted Ming Kuan's shoulder and said with a smile, "Believe in yourself. We won't be worse than others." Ming Kuan thought about it and nodded. Brother Yi is right. We have to correct our attitude. Yi Xian laughed and said, "All of you cultivate well here. I have to go take care of something." With that, he turned around and left. After Yi Xian left, Ming Kuan suddenly looked at Xiao Gu. "Did Brother Yi just enter the inner court?" Xiao Gu nodded, "Just entered." Ming Kuan said softly, "Yi Xian's strength is truly unfathomable." Xiao Gu, after leaving the Dao Yi Institute, Yi Xian went to Dao Yi City and found a chamber of commerce. Taihe Merchant Association. After Yi Xian entered the chamber of commerce, a delicate and pretty woman came to greet him. She glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "What do you need?" Yi Xian said, "I need 3 things, divine soul wood, heart-protecting lotus, spirit-sculpting flower. Do you have it?" The pretty woman looked at Yi Xian and said, "Sir, these aren't ordinary things." Yi Xian laughed, "Are you afraid that I can't afford it?" The pretty woman hurriedly said, "That's not what I mean, it's just that." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Can you make the decision? If you can't make the decision, then let someone who can make the decision talk to me." The pretty woman bowed slightly. "Then please wait a moment." With that, she turned around and left. Not long after, an old man walked out. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and asked, "What 3 items do you want?" Yi Xian nodded. The old man smiled and said, "Those 3 items are all extraordinary items, especially the heart-protecting lotus. It is incomparably precious and is worth at least 100,000 purple Genesis crystals." 100,000. Hearing this, Yi Xian's heart relaxed. 100,000 purple Genesis crystals was naturally a piece of cake for him. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Then please bring those 3 items over." The old man glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "It seems that you aren't an ordinary person. May I know who you are?" Yi Xian was a little impatient. "I'm just an independent cultivator. Sir, I urgently need those 3 items." The old man smiled and said, "Esteemed guest, my chamber of commerce does not have these 3 items." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression instantly turned cold. "What the hell are you talking about if you don't have them?" The old man continued, "Esteemed guest, please don't misunderstand. The old man means that we don't have them here. However, we can transfer the goods. It will take a day." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Then transfer the goods as soon as possible." The old man smiled and said, "You need to pay first. 200,000 purple Genesis crystals as a deposit. If you suddenly don't want it, we won't refund the money." A deposit. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he tapped with his finger, and a spatial ring flew over to the old man. There were exactly 200,000 purple Genesis crystals within the spatial ring. The old man grinned as he put the spatial ring away, and then he said, "Please come here at the same time tomorrow." Yi Xian cupped his fists and said, "Then I'll be troubling you." He turned around and left once he finished speaking. Yi Xian returned to Dao Yi Academy after he left the Grand Harmony Merchant Group. Yi Xian entered the World Prison Pagoda in his wooden house. A sword technique. Now, he could finally calm down and study the sword technique that the figure in the Grey World had given him. The sword technique didn't have a name, but he could sense that it was very powerful. Yi Xian started to study it, and it didn't take long for him to notice a special characteristic of the sword technique. The most special characteristic of the sword technique was its explosive force. The explosive force at the instant the sword was drawn. This sword technique was different from the life and death sword technique. The might of the life and death sword technique was related to faith and confidence, while this sword technique was purely related to strength and speed. The two were completely different. With this thought in mind, an idea suddenly popped into Yi Xian's mind. Could he fuse these two different sword techniques into one? Fuse. Yi Xian was a little excited, because he realized that it was completely possible. Yi Xian didn't just think about it, but immediately tried it. However, as soon as he tried it, he ran into a problem. The scabbard. He found that a normal scabbard couldn't withstand these two sword techniques. No, just the sword technique of drawing the sword wasn't something a normal scabbard could withstand. He needed to find a suitable scabbard. Without a scabbard, Yi Xian could only temporarily give up on fusing the two sword techniques. What he could do now was to study and thoroughly comprehend this sword technique. Time slowly passed. On the second day, Yi Xian left the World Prison Pagoda and once again arrived at the Grand Harmony Merchant Group in Dao-Yi City. The person who welcomed him was still the delicate and pretty woman from yesterday. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Please inform your merchant group's manager that I'm here to collect something." The delicate and pretty woman nodded, "Please wait." Then, she turned and left. Not long after, the delicate and pretty woman walked out. She walked up to Yi Xian and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Manager Su isn't here." Yi Xian frowned, "He told me to come here today to collect something, why isn't he here?" The delicate and pretty woman shook her head, "I don't know, please come back tomorrow." Then, she turned and left. Seeing this, Yi Xian's frown deepened, and he fell silent for a moment before he turned and left. The next day, Yi Xian came to the Grand Harmony Merchant Group again and saw the delicate and pretty woman again. He was just about to speak when the delicate and pretty woman said, "Manager Su isn't here, please come back another day." Then, she turned and left. Yi Xian suddenly stood in front of the delicate and pretty woman, and the delicate and pretty woman frowned slightly. Yi Xian smiled, "He doesn't want to see me, right?" The delicate and pretty woman replied, "Manager Su isn't here." Yi Xian suddenly slammed his right hand. Boom! Not far away, the wall collapsed, and an old man appeared there. It was Manager Su. Yi Xian pointed at Steward Su, who was not far away, and said with a smile, "Didn't you say he wasn't here?" The delicate and pretty woman looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. At this time, Manager Su walked in front of Yi Xian, his expression calm. "What, are you going to use force here?" Yi Xian smiled, "I wouldn't dare, I'm just here to collect something I need." "Give it to me, I'll leave immediately." "Something?" Manager Su was expressionless. "What is it? The old man doesn't know." Hearing this, Yi Xian was instantly happy. He smiled, "This Grand Harmony Merchant Group is actually a black shop." Manager Su narrowed his eyes, a cold light flashing in his eyes. "Sir, you can't say such things." As his voice fell, 6 people suddenly appeared behind him, all of them void-piercing realm experts. Manager Su looked coldly at Yi Xian. "This wall is worth 100,000 purple origin crystals, leave 100,000 purple origin crystals and I'll let you live." 100,000 purple origin crystals. Yi Xian thought for a moment, he smiled, "Are you sure you want it?" Manager Su said indifferently, "Why not?" Yi Xian pointed his finger, and a storage ring flew in front of Steward Su. Steward Su glanced at the storage ring. There were exactly 100,000 purple origin crystals in it. Manager Su put away the storage ring and looked at Yi Xian. "Let's go." Yi Xian smiled, turned around and left. Manager Su and the others did not stop him. At this time, the delicate and pretty woman suddenly said, "Why don't you kill him and get rid of future troubles?" Manager Su said indifferently, "Why kill him? He's just a true defensive realm, let him come for revenge. If he doesn't come for revenge, how can I earn more?" With that, he turned around and left. After Yi Xian left Tai-He Merchant Association, he immediately returned to Dao-Yi Academy. Inside the Violet Flame Tower, Yi Xian found Xiao Gu and the others. What? Brother Yi, you were extorted 10 million purple origin crystals by Tai He Merchant Association? Holy shit, 10 million purple origin crystals. Is Tai He Merchant Association crazy? How dare they extort our Dao E Academy? Let's go tell the Grand Elder. With that, everyone was about to find the Grand Elder. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Why find the Grand Elder? We'll settle this ourselves. Come, brothers, follow me to Tai He Merchant Association." With that, he turned around and left. Xiao Gu and the others hurriedly followed. On the way, Xiao Gu said in a deep voice, "Brother Yi, this Tai He Merchant Association is not simple. It is the largest merchant association in our northern region, with astonishing financial resources and vast connections. We have to be careful." Yi Xian nodded and said with a smile, "Be careful, everyone be careful. This time, we're here to reason things out." Hearing this, Xiao Ji's expression relaxed slightly. Reason meant that the matter would not be blown out of proportion. Soon, Yi Xian brought 12 inner courtyard students to Tai He Merchant Association. The sudden arrival of so many experts naturally alarmed Tai He Merchant Association. Soon, several void-piercing realm experts blocked in front of Yi Xian and the others. The one leading them was Steward Su from before. Seeing Yi Xian, Steward Su was slightly taken aback, then he glanced at the people beside Yi Xian, and his expression quickly turned solemn. Because the people who came were all void-piercing realm experts, of course, except for Yi Xian. Beside Yi Xian, Xiao Gu looked at Steward Su. "Brother Yi, is he the one who extorted 10 million purple origin crystals from you?" Yi Xian nodded, his face full of grief and indignation. It's him, he extorted 10 million purple origin crystals from me." Hearing this, Steward Su was stunned, then he flew into a rage. "What nonsense are you talking about? You!" At this moment, Yi Xian, who was in front of him, suddenly disappeared. The next second, a sword pierced his throat. Blood splattered. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Xiao Gu looked at Yi Xian, his face full of shock. "Big brother, didn't you say you were reasonable?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "This is my way of reasoning." Xiao Gu. Chapter 374. In the field, everyone was struck dumb after Yi Xian had made his move. Obviously, they did not expect Yi Xian to suddenly attack. Steward Su, who was still breathing, was also staring at Yi Xian. His eyes were wide open and filled with disbelief. He did not expect Yi Xian to attack him. Moreover, he did not even have the strength to fight back. At this moment, a group of experts suddenly appeared in the surroundings. They were all from the Tai He Trade Association. At the same time, a black-robed old man appeared in front of Yi Xian and the others. The black-robed old man glanced at Yi Xian and the others, frowning slightly. "Are you from the Dao E Academy?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes, we are from the Dao E Academy." The black-robed old man stared at Yi Xian. "Why did you kill people from my Tai He Trade Association?" Yi Xian sneered. "Senior, you should ask him that." The black-robed old man's expression gradually turned cold. "You want me to ask a dead person?" Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. "Sorry, I forgot about this. It's like this. 2 days ago, I came to your trade association to buy a batch of things. Steward Su asked me to pay 200,000 purple origin crystals as a deposit, which I did. However, when I came today, not only did he not give me what I wanted, he even starved me of 10 million purple origin crystals. 10 million purple origin crystals." Hearing Yi Xian's words, the black-robed old man's eyelids twitched. 10 million purple origin crystals. Are you sure? Yi Xian sternly said, "Of course I'm sure. Senior, I have no other request." As long as your trade association compensates me with 10 million purple origin crystals, I will naturally leave. Compensate 10 million purple origin crystals. The black-robed old man laughed in anger. Interesting. To think that someone would come to extort my Tai-He Trade Association today. Interesting. Yi Xian said indifferently, Tai-He Trade Association does not intend to compensate? The black-robed old man sneered. Do you think my Tai-He Trade Association is so easy to bully? You. Right at this moment, Yi Xian said abruptly, seize everything in the Imperial Harmony Trading Company. Leave nothing behind. As his voice faded, he suddenly drew his sword and charged toward the black-robed elder. Seeing this scene, Xiao Gu and the others were stunned. Robbing Tai-He Merchant Association? By the time everyone regained their senses, Yi Xian had already started fighting with the black-robed old man. Xiao Gu and the others looked at each other. Soon, Xiao Ji's expression became somewhat sinister. Tai-He Chamber of Commerce is bullying our Dao-E Academy. Beat them up. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone rushed over. In the Dao-E Academy, inside the Dao-E Hall, the first elder suddenly sat up and looked at an old man in front of him in disbelief. What did you say? He brought inner courtyard disciples to rob Tai-He Merchant Association? The old man nodded, yes, they have already started fighting with the Tai-He Chamber of Commerce. The matter is very big, and many people in the city are already paying attention. The first elder said in a deep voice, why did he rob Tai-He Merchant Association? The old man said, it is said that he went to Tai-He Merchant Association to buy a few things, and a steward of Tai-He Merchant Association embezzled his money. This should be true, but it is absolutely not 10 million purple source crystals. This guy must have deliberately blackmailed Tai-He Merchant Association. Speaking of this, he shook his head with a wry smile, this guy is really bold. The first elder said indifferently, not only is he bold, but he is also cunning. The old man looked at the first elder, what do you mean? The first elder chuckled, this was originally his own matter, but now he has forcibly turned it into a matter between Tai-He Merchant Association and our Dao-E Academy. Saying that, he got up, let's go and have a look. Tai-He Merchant Association. Yi Xian and the others have already started fighting with Tai-He Merchant Association. As soon as the battle began, Tai-He Merchant Association's side was completely annihilated. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Under Yi Xian's order, Xiao Gu and the others also frantically looted the Tai-He Merchant Association's things. At first, Xiao Gu and the others were a little hesitant, but soon they became even crazier than Yi Xian. Tai-He Merchant Association is the best merchant association in Dao-E City, how could the things inside be ordinary? The black-robed old man who was fighting with Yi Xian was shocked and angry. He was shocked because he did not expect Yi Xian, who was only at the true Imperial Law realm, to be so terrifying, and angry because more than half of the Tai-He Merchant Association's things had been looted by Xiao Gu and the others. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the battlefield, stop. As the voice fell, a powerful force suddenly enveloped Yi Xian and the others. Everyone stopped. Yi Xian looked up and saw a middle-aged man standing quietly in the air, and the middle-aged man was looking at him. The middle-aged man looked down at Yi Xian, did the Dao-E Academy give you the courage? As the voice fell, an invisible pressure suddenly fell from the sky, pressing down on Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to act, but an old man suddenly appeared in front of him, it was the first elder. The first elder gently waved his right hand, and the invisible pressure disappeared directly. The first elder appeared in front of the middle-aged man, smiled, and said, Brother Song Lian, I trust you have been well since we last met. The middle-aged man called Song Lian looked coldly at the first elder, your Dao-E Academy openly robbed my Tai-He Merchant Association, how do you explain that? The first elder shook his head and smiled, Brother Song Lian, this matter is your Tai-He Merchant Association's fault. My student came to buy things from your Taiha Merchant Association, but your steward wanted to take advantage of him, and even blackmailed him. This matter, your Taiha Merchant Association did not act in the right way. Song Lian frowned slightly and turned to look at the black-robed old man below. The black-robed old man said in a deep voice, I don't know the specific situation. As he spoke, he turned to look at the delicate woman not far away. What exactly is the situation? The delicate woman was somewhat hesitant. Seeing this, the black-robed old man's face immediately sank. At this moment, the first elder suddenly smiled and said, Brother Song Lian, the matter is very clear, isn't it? Hearing this, the delicate woman below hurriedly said, No, although Steward Su took 200,000 purple Genesis crystals from him, he did not blackmail him for 10 million purple Genesis crystals. As soon as these words came out, Song Lian's face suddenly turned ugly, and the surrounding people booed. Cheating. Taiha Merchant Association really cheated. Song Lian suddenly waved his right hand, and the delicate woman directly turned into a pile of minced meat. Song Lian threw a cold look at Yi Xian below. In the end, he looked at the Grand Elder. Congratulations to your institute for getting such an excellent student. With that, he turned and left. Below, Yi Xian hurriedly said, My 10 million purple Genesis crystals. The first elder appeared in front of Yi Xian and glanced at Yi Xian, no one to stop. Yi Xian said indifferently, They blackmailed me, how can I let this matter go? The corners of the first elder's mouth twitched, You've already robbed more than half of their Chamber of Commerce, you've made a profit. A profit. Yi Xian thought about it and agreed. At this moment, the first elder suddenly said, Yi Xian, what you did is equivalent to offending the Taiha Merchant Association, do you know that? Yi Xian smiled, First elder, I am not a troublemaker, but the Taiha Merchant Association has bullied me, I can't tolerate it. The first elder glanced at Yi Xian, shook his head and sighed, In the future, if there is nothing important, try not to leave the academy. The Taihang Merchant Association has suffered such a big loss this time, they will not let this matter rest. Yi Xian nodded, I understand. The first elder nodded, This chapter is not finished, please turn the page, then he turned and left. Yi Xian took Xiao Gu and the others back to the Dao Yi Academy. Inside Yi Xian's wooden house, everyone gathered around the table. Dividing the spoils. Xiao Gu smiled, This time, we obtained a total of 6 million purple origin crystals, including 49 heaven-grade treasures and various heaven and earth treasures. I estimate that they are worth about 2 million purple origin crystals. A total of 8 million. Yi Xian smiled, Xiao Gu, you divide it, everyone has a share. Xiao Gu grinned, then began to divide the spoils. He first gave it to Yi Xian, but Yi Xian frowned, What do you mean by this? He obtained 3 million purple origin crystals. Xiao Gu smiled, Brother Yi, the reason why we obtained so much this time is all because of you. You contributed the most, so naturally you should obtain it. We have no objections. Everyone nodded, indicating that they had no objections. Yi Xian shook his head, If it weren't for the brothers, I wouldn't have been able to suppress the Tai-He Chamber of Commerce. Everyone has contributed, so let's divide it equally. Xiao Gu still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian sternly said, If I said to divide it equally, then so be it, do it. Seeing that Yi Xian was so determined, Xiao Gu hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Soon, everyone divided the wealth. Inside the bamboo house, everyone had a bright smile on their faces. With this wealth, it could be said that they would not lack purple origin crystals for a short period of time. And this time, Yi Xian's position in everyone's hearts also changed a little. After everyone left, Yi Xian came to the divine weapon courtyard of the Dao Yi Academy. There were many rare treasures stored inside. His purpose this time was to see if there was a suitable scabbard for him. But just as he arrived at the entrance of the divine weapon courtyard, he was stopped by an old man. The old man glanced at Yi Xian. Do you have an entry token? Yi Xian was stunned. Entry token? What entry token? The old man glanced at Yi Xian. If not, what are you doing here? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, who do I find for this entry token? The old man said lightly, go find the Grand Elder. Yi Xian smiled, okay, I'll go find the Grand Elder. After saying that, he turned and ran. Old man, Dao Yi Hall. Yi Xian found the Grand Elder. The Grand Elder looked at Yi Xian in front of him. You want to go to the Divine Weapon Courtyard? Yi Xian nodded. The Grand Elder asked, what for? Yi Xian said, to find something. The Grand Elder's eyes twitched. What do you think the Divine Weapon Courtyard is? You think you can go there whenever you want? Yi Xian said with a smile, I understand, there must be some conditions to enter. Grand Elder, why don't you tell me about it? The Grand Elder said lightly, there are no harsh conditions, you can enter as long as you have performed a meritorious deed for the Academy. Meritorious deed. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, I have performed a meritorious deed for the Academy. The Grand Elder looked at Yi Xian, a little surprised, when have you performed a meritorious deed for the Academy? Yi Xian said seriously, Grand Elder, what do you think of me, Yi Xian? The Grand Elder looked at Yi Xian, then said, not bad talent, not bad strength, and outstanding combat ability, rare. Yi Xian said seriously, Grand Elder, I am not narcissistic, but a genius like me joining the Dao Yi Academy is in itself a meritorious deed for the Academy. And a meritorious deed. The Grand Elder was dumbfounded. End of this chapter. Chapter 375. The First Elder stared at Yi Xian. He didn't expect that someone in this world could be so shameless. So shameless that he was speechless. After a while, the First Elder shook his head and smiled. What do you need? Yi Xian said quickly, a scabbard. A scabbard? The First Elder thought for a while and said, that's not difficult. You don't need to enter the institute. I'll give you a scabbard. Yi Xian shook his head, First Elder, the scabbard I need isn't an ordinary scabbard. I need a very good scabbard. How good is it? The First Elder asked. Yi Xian thought for a while and said, Saint rank. His intuition told him that if it wasn't a Saint rank scabbard, it wouldn't be able to bear those two sword skills. It must be a Saint rank scabbard. The First Elder was stunned by Yi Xian's words and shook his head, no. The old man can tell you for sure that the institute doesn't have a Saint rank scabbard. He paused for a while and said, the Immortal Sword Sect might have one, but they won't give it to you. The Immortal Sword Sect. Yi Xian fell silent. The First Elder suddenly said, besides the Immortal Sword Sect, there's another place you can go. Yi Xian asked quickly, where? The First Elder said, the blacksmith's shop. The blacksmith's shop? Yi Xian was puzzled, where? The First Elder said with a smile, in Dao Yi City. There's a blacksmith there, a very powerful one. He might be able to customize a scabbard for you. However, whether or not he will do it for you will depend on your own ability. Yi Xian thought for a while and said, I'll give it a try. The First Elder smiled, good luck. Yi Xian said again, First Elder, I want to ask you for a favor. The First Elder said, speak. Yi Xian said, I need 3 items. The Great Elder said, the 3 items you bought from Taiha Merchant Association? Yi Xian nodded. The Great Elder nodded slightly. I'll do it for you, but you'll have to pay for it yourself. Yi Xian smiled and said, of course. Then, I'll visit Great Elder another day. With that, he bowed slightly before turning around and leaving. Seeing Yi Xian leave, the Great Elder shook his head and lightly laughed. Actually, his personality isn't that bad. In the beginning, he had indeed coveted Yi Xian's treasure. But in the end, he gradually changed his mind. Just as the mysterious black-clothed man had said, the treasure on Yi Xian's body would bring bad luck to whoever took it. Instead of seizing this hot potato by force, it was better to form a good relationship with Yi Xian and wait for the future. Moreover, he realized that Yi Xian was a person who was easy to get along with. Of course, he was also a bit irascible, but this irascibility, in his view, was actually a kind of personality. After Yi Xian left Dao Yi Palace Hall, he came to Dao Yi City. Soon, he found the blacksmith shop that the great elder had mentioned. The blacksmith shop was not big, it should be said to be very small, and it was a bit shabby. In front of the blacksmith shop, there was some messy scrap iron. At first glance, it looked very desolate. Yi Xian walked to the door and knocked. At this time, a voice suddenly came from inside. Scram! Yi Xian, naturally, Yi Xian would not give up so easily. He knocked on the door again. At this time, a powerful force shook out from inside. Yi Xian's face changed, and his right arm moved forward to block. Bang! Yi Xian retreated again and again. This time, he directly retreated dozens of feet. After Yi Xian stopped, he looked at his right arm. His entire right arm had cracked. His expression gradually became serious. Soon, Yi Xian walked up to the door and knocked on it once more. Boom! Yi Xian was sent flying again. Just like this continued for about half an hour, and the door opened. An old man in tattered clothes walked out. He pointed at Yi Xian angrily. Are you out of your mind? Is there something wrong with you? Is there no end to this? You. As he spoke, he suddenly stopped. Because Yi Xian, who was not far away, turned around and ran. He did not even see a shadow. The old man was stunned. After a moment, the old man cursed angrily. What the hell? After saying that, he turned around and returned to his room. The next day, Yi Xian came to the blacksmith shop again and knocked on the door again. An hour later, the blacksmith shop's door was suddenly opened, and an afterimage shot out. In the distance, Yi Xian turned around and ran. The old man who rushed out had an ugly expression on his face. On the third day, just as Yi Xian knocked on the door, a powerful force suddenly blasted out from the door. Yi Xian turned around and ran. This time, the old man chose to give chase. He sensed the old man chasing after him. Yi Xian hurriedly quickened his pace. Not only that, but he also used the chaotic energy to conceal himself. Thus, very quickly, the old man lost track of him. Somewhere outside the city, the old man looked around coldly. At this moment, there was no longer any trace of Yi Xian's aura. A moment later, he turned around and left. On the fourth day, Yi Xian came to the smithy again. Just like that, on the seventh day, Yi Xian knocked on the door and turned around to run. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from behind him. Bastard, what do you want? Yi Xian stopped and turned around. He saw the old man coldly staring at him at the blacksmith shop's door. Yi Xian grinned. Greetings, senior. This junior is Yi Xian from Dao Yi Academy. The old man looked coldly at Yi Xian. What do you want? Yi Xian smiled. Senior, this junior wants to ask you to forge a scabbard for me. Hurry up and get lost. The old man waved his hand impatiently. The old man will not forge anything for anyone. Scram. After saying that, he turned around and walked into the house. Outside the house, Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then turned around and left. The next day, Yi Xian came to the smithy again and knocked on the door. When the door opened and saw Yi Xian, the old man frowned. Are you done? Yi Xian said. I want to learn blacksmithing. Blacksmithing. He thought of something. He needed huge swords, and if he were to buy all of them, he would not be able to afford it even with his wealth. Why not forge them himself? Learn blacksmithing. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the old man was slightly stunned. You want to learn blacksmithing? Yi Xian immediately said. Yes, I want to learn blacksmithing. The old man sneered. What does it have to do with this old man? Go learn it with someone else. This old man has no time for you. Yi Xian said indifferently. If you don't accept me, I will not give up. Hearing this, the old man flew into a rage. Are you threatening me? Yi Xian hurriedly said, No, no. Senior, to be honest, don't be so quick to refuse me. Look at me. I'm not bad. The old man glared at Yi Xian. Why is your skin so thick? Yi Xian said seriously, Senior, I'm serious. You definitely won't be disappointed if you let me try. The old man stared at Yi Xian for a long time, and then he said, You aren't just being thick-skinned. You've reached a state of shamelessness. Yi Xian was speechless. The old man sized up Yi Xian. Who asked you to come here? Yi Xian said, The Grand Elder. The old man frowned. The Grand Elder of Dao Yi Academy? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The old man fell silent for a short while before he said, The old man doesn't accept disciples, nor does he forge anything for others. Don't bother the old man. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and was about to enter the room. Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior. The old man stopped and turned around to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled, Senior, do you have anyone to recommend? Right, I don't recommend just anyone. I need a scabbard, an extremely good one. Only then will it be able to endure my sword techniques. The old man sized up Yi Xian. You need a scabbard? Not a sword? Yi Xian nodded. The old man spoke indifferently, You're quite arrogant. Tell me, what level of scabbard do you need? Yi Xian spoke solemnly, The saint rank. The old man sneered, It's just a saint rank. Go, don't bother the old man. After that, he turned around and left. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, What do you mean by a saint rank? Old man, do you know what a saint rank is? Do you? The old man's eyes twitched. The old man doesn't know what a saint rank is? As he spoke, he waved his right hand, and an arm-long iron hammer suddenly flew to Yi Xian from a corner not far away. Look! Yi Xian was stunned when he saw the iron hammer because it was a saint rank. It really is a saint rank. Yi Xian's expression became solemn. Who is this old man? The old man sneered, Do you have a saint rank? Yi Xian said solemnly, Old man, I'm not bragging, but if I take something out, it will definitely scare the crap out of you. A wisp of ridicule appeared on the corners of the old man's mouth. You want to scare me out of my wits? What a big tone you have. What treasure has the old man not seen in his life? Yi Xian said lightly, Old man, since it's like this, let's make a bet. If the item I take out can amaze you, you'll forge a scabbard for me. If not, I'll leave and never bother you again. How about it? The old man coldly looked at Yi Xian. In the end, it's still a scabbard. You're not only thick-skinned but also cunning. A swordsman like you is hard to come by in 1,000 years. Yi Xian was expressionless. Just tell me if you want to bet or not. The old man sneered, Bet, of course I want to bet. The old man wants to see what treasure you have that can amaze the old man. However, I'll say this in advance, if you can't amaze the old man, you'll leave and never come back. Yi Xian nodded, Remember, if I amaze you, you'll forge a scabbard no lower than the saint level. The old man said lightly, Fine. Now, take out your treasure. Yi Xian looked around and said, It's not convenient here. Come with me. Then, he turned and left. The old man frowned, but he still followed. Soon, Yi Xian led the old man to a mountain range outside Dao Yi City. Yi Xian stopped and turned to look at the old man. The old man said lightly, "Take it out." Yi Xian smiled, he opened his right hand, and a sword suddenly appeared in front of him. The sword at the top of the pagoda. When the sword appeared in front of him, heaven and earth changed color in an instant. The old man was stunned. Chapter 376. At this moment, the old man's eyes were wide open, and they were filled with disbelief. It didn't take long for him to walk swiftly towards the sword. Meanwhile, Yi Xian sheathed the sword. The surroundings instantly returned to calm. The old man walked over to Yi Xian, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Senior, based on your expression, it should have shocked you." The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "What is that?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "My sword." The old man fell silent for a moment, and then he shook his head. "This sword isn't a peerless weapon, but its owner is extremely strong, and he gave it new life. To put it simply, the sword is very ordinary, but the owner is extraordinary. Therefore, the sword is extraordinary as well." When he spoke up to this point, he looked at Yi Xian. "You're just a sword immortal, and you don't have the ability to give a sword new life." Yi Xian fell silent. This old man really isn't simple. Meanwhile, the old man said, "All right," the old man said it. "I never expected that I would encounter such a divine object here." Yi Xian grinned when he heard this. "Senior, when will you forge a scabbard for me?" The old man fell silent. Yi Xian's face sank. This old man wouldn't go back on his word, right? As if he knew what Yi Xian was thinking, the old man sneered. "Don't worry, the old man won't go back on his word." Yi Xian chuckled. "How could a figure like Senior possibly go back on his word? I have complete confidence in Senior." The old man said indifferently, "Come with me." As he spoke, Yi Xian followed the old man back to the smithy. After they entered the smithy, a cold and musty smell instantly assaulted their faces, and it was extremely unpleasant. The old man walked over to the side and lay down on a bamboo couch. He said indifferently, "Let me see your sword. I need to make one for you." Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he withdrew the saint-rank dark sword. The elder waved his right hand, and the dark blue sword flew into his grasp. He glanced at the sword in his hand. Pseudo-saint tier. Pseudo-saint level? Yi Xian was stunned. "What do you mean?" The old man said coldly, "It means that your sword is trash. Do you understand?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "Senior, is this sword trash?" The old man sneered, "The craftsmanship of this sword is passable, but the materials used are trash. If it wasn't for the sword spirit being a bit special, this sword wouldn't even be considered a pseudo-saint grade sword." As he spoke, he threw the sword in front of Yi Xian. "This sword won't do. Change to another one." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "No more." Speaking up to here, he seemed to have thought of something and chuckled, "Senior, why don't you forge a sword for me directly? It would be perfect to forge a sword and a scabbard together." "Dream on." The old man glared at Yi Xian. "This old man will only make a scabbard for you." Yi Xian was slightly helpless. "A scabbard it is." As he spoke, he waved the sword in his hand. "This is my best sword, so I'll make a scabbard for it." The old man spoke indifferently. "Are you sure? After all, you only have this chance. If you have a good sword, then you'll have an even better scabbard." Yi Xian laughed bitterly. "Senior, I want to, but I don't have any other swords. I'll just make do with it for now." The old man glanced at Yi Xian. What about the one from before? Yi Xian shrugged. It's too formidable. I can't take it for now. The old man fell silent for a short moment before he said, if you're willing, then you can lend that sword to me, and I'll forge a replica for you. How about it? Yi Xian was stunned. A replica? What do you mean? The old man spoke in a low voice. I'll forge a replica, one that you can use. How about it? Yi Xian fell silent. The old man spoke indifferently. It's fine if you're worried. Yi Xian shook his head. There's nothing to be worried about. But senior, I'm unable to control this sword. So, it would cause a huge commotion if I let it out. The old man fell silent for a short moment before he said, come with me. As soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and walked towards the exit. Yi Xian hurriedly followed the old man. Yi Xian followed the old man to an underground entrance, and then he followed the old man all the way down. Just like that, they walked for almost 4 hours. When they walked out of an exit, the scene before his eyes suddenly opened up, and there was an abandoned ruin 300 m away from him. The old man led Yi Xian to the ruins, and it wasn't long before the old man stopped. There was an enormous furnace before him, and there was lava within it. Yi Xian turned around to look at the old man. What's this? The old man spoke indifferently. This iron furnace is connected to the center of the earth, and it contains an extremely large amount of the energy of the earth veins and lava. As he spoke, he turned to look at Yi Xian. Sword. Yi Xian waved his right hand, and the sword at the top of the tower instantly appeared in front of him. At the instant that sword appeared, the ground around him started trembling. The old man's expression instantly turned solemn when he witnessed this scene. The might of this sword far surpasses this world. How formidable was its owner? As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. Kid, your background isn't simple at all. Yi Xian laughed embarrassedly. No, I don't have any backing. Really? The old man laughed coldly. Don't worry. The old man has no intentions towards you. As he spoke, he waved his right hand. In an instant, an invisible force appeared in the surroundings, and Yi Xian sensed that the space around him seemed to have been strengthened at that moment. The old man ignored Yi Xian. He waved his right hand again, and a large pile of items appeared on his right. These items were strangely shaped, and one could tell at a glance that they weren't ordinary items. Very soon, Yi Xian seemed to have noticed something, and he hurriedly asked, Senior, are these materials for forging swords? The old man glanced at Yi Xian. Of course. I told you to prepare the materials. Do you have them? Hearing this, Yi Xian was instantly overjoyed. He suddenly realized that this old man was actually quite nice. The old man ignored Yi Xian and turned to look at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. There was a trace of excitement in his eyes as he looked at the sword. Yi Xian was quite excited as well. He couldn't utilize the sword at the top of the pagoda for now, and it was something that he'd always felt regretful about. On the other hand, if he had a replica, then it would definitely be a good thing for him. Because it could allow him to make a transition. The old man suddenly gazed at Yi Xian, put the sword away. I'll use it when I need it. Yi Xian did as he was told and put the sword away. On the other hand, the old man raised his right hand lightly, and it didn't take long for all the treasures on his right to fly up into the air. After that, they flew into the iron furnace one by one. At the same time, he withdrew a command token, and it didn't take long for the enormous iron furnace to start trembling. At the same time, the lava within the iron furnace started to tremble, and it didn't take long for countless strands of mysterious energy to converge within the iron furnace. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and said, "Stand guard." As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped up into the iron furnace. Outside the iron furnace, Yi Xian rubbed his hands together with slight excitement. The sword forged by this old man is definitely at the saint rank at the very least. Moreover, there's even a sheath. At that time, he would be able to combine both sword techniques, and his overall strength would improve by more than just a little. Wait. All he could do now was wait. Just like that, day after day passed. On the third day, there was still no movement from within the iron furnace. Yi Xian had wanted to go in and take a look on many occasions, but he didn't in the end. Because he knew that if he was interrupted at the critical moment, then it was very likely that all his efforts would be wasted. So, he continued waiting. Just like that, on the fifth day, the iron furnace started to tremble slightly, and Yi Xian hurriedly stood up. Is it about to be done? At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly turned around. Not far in front of him, a young man and an old man were walking towards him. The young man and the old man were slightly stunned when they saw Yi Xian. The young man sized up Yi Xian and frowned. "Who are you?" Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. "Who are you?" The young man's frown deepened. "I'm asking you a question." Yi Xian replied calmly, "I'm a student of the inner court of Dao Yi Academy." Dao Yi Academy? The young man turned to look at the old man, and the old man replied calmly, "It's an academy in the northern region. When Mu Dao Yi was still around, it was not bad, but now, it's not good enough." Hearing this, the young man looked at Yi Xian. "Why are you here?" Yi Xian smiled, "To run some errands." The young man looked straight at Yi Xian. "Now, get lost. I won't repeat myself." Chapter 377. Yi Xian remained silent. The other party did not even give face to the Dao Yi Academy. Clearly, the other party had a powerful background. Since the Dao Yi Academy's reputation was useless, he had to make his move. He chose to make the first move. Yi Xian suddenly wielded his sword. This sword attack was very fast, and there was no sign at all. Before the young man could react, Yi Xian's sword was already at his forehead. The old man had appeared on Yi Xian's left side. His left hand was about 10 inches away from Yi Xian's shoulder, but he did not dare to touch it. Yi Xian's sudden attack caught the old man and the young man by surprise. Of course, they were too confident and underestimated Yi Xian. The old man stared at Yi Xian. "Let him go." Yi Xian smiled. "I mean no harm. I just don't want you to disturb a senior of mine. That's all." The old man stared at Yi Xian calmly, but his eyes were filled with murderous intent. "On the count of 3, if you don't let him go," the old man. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly pushed his right hand forward lightly. Chi! The sword pierced half an inch into the young man's forehead, and blood spurted out. Yi Xian turned around to look at the old man. He said with a smile, "Count them." "Why don't you count?" "I'm listening." The old man looked at Yi Xian for a while, then said, "You will pay for this." Yi Xian raised his sword again, this time deeper into the young man's forehead. The young man's body trembled. If it had gone any deeper, he would have died. At this moment, the old man's voice became completely silent. Yi Xian looked at the old man and smiled. "Come on, continue." The old man stared at Yi Xian and said nothing. The young man in front of Yi Xian looked ferocious. "Do you know who I am?" Yi Xian turned to look at the young man. "Then do you know who I am?" The young man sneered, "Is that so? I want to know who you are." Yi Xian grinned. "Actually, I'm your father." "You?" The young man flared up with rage. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly spoke angrily, "Shut the fuck up. One more word and I'll chop you up." The young man wanted to say something, but the old man not far away shook his head slightly, signaling him not to say anything. The young man said in a low voice, "Uncle Yunxiao, I don't believe he dares to kill me." Yi Xian laughed and said, "Do you want to try?" The young man was just about to speak when the old man called Yunxiao spoke abruptly. "Young man, speak. What exactly do you want?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Nothing much, I just want you to wait." "Is this okay?" Yunxiao asked. "That's it?" Yi Xian nodded. "That's it." Yunxiao was about to speak when the iron furnace not far away suddenly shook violently. Then, a figure flew out. It was the old man from the smithy. The old man walked in front of Yi Xian with a long box in his hand. Yi Xian was slightly excited. "It's done." The old man shook his head. "There's still one more step." As he spoke, he suddenly looked at Yunxiao and Yunxiao. When he saw them, his face instantly turned cold. "What are you doing here?" The young man said, "Third uncle, father asked me to invite you back." "Go back?" The old man sneered. "Go back for what? Also, I'm no longer a Yun family member, nor am I your third uncle. You two hurry up and scram." The young man said in a low voice. "Third uncle, you're also a Yun family member," the old man coldly said. "Didn't you hear what I said?" The young man still wanted to say something, but Yunxiao suddenly said, "Brother Yunsheng, the patriarch said that if you don't want to go back, it's fine. However, the Yun family's treasure, the earth vein furnace, must be returned to the Yun family. Apart from that, the Yun family's forging technique must not be taught to outsiders, otherwise," the old man sneered. "Otherwise what? Otherwise kill me?" Yunxiao looked at Yunsheng without saying anything. Yunsheng suddenly looked at Yi Xian in front of him. "He is my successor. If you have the ability, then kill him." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Fuck, this old man wants to mess with me." Hearing Yunsheng's words, Yunxiao and Yunxiao immediately looked at Yi Xian with unfriendly expressions. Yi Xian smiled. "You two, do you have any objections?" Yunxiao coldly looked at Yi Xian. Finally, he looked at Yunsheng. "You're on your own." With that, he turned and left with the young man. Yunsheng fell silent for a moment, and then he looked at Yi Xian. "Let's go." With that, he left with Yi Xian. Under Yunsheng's lead, the two of them arrived before a teleportation formation. In next to no time, the two of them vanished from sight. Around 10 minutes later, the two of them arrived beneath a waterfall. The waterfall was over 100 meters long, and there was a small pool beneath it. "What's this?" Yi Xian asked. Yunsheng spoke indifferently. "My Yun family opened up a geocentric spiritual spring all those years ago. This is the last step, the watering of the spiritual spring. When my Yun family left, we took almost all of it with us. Now, there shouldn't be much left. However, it's enough for us." As he spoke, he tossed the long box in his hand into the pool. In next to no time, the pool shook violently, and rays of sword light shot out from the pool. "Blood." At this moment, Yunsheng looked at Yi Xian. "2 drops of blood." Yi Xian nodded. With a point of his finger, 2 drops of blood flew into the pool, bang. The entire pool shook violently all of a sudden. Yi Xian asked nervously, "Senior, there shouldn't be a problem, right?" Yunsheng replied calmly, "What problem could there be?" Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. "No problem." "How could there be a problem, senior?" Yunsheng glanced at Yi Xian. "You're the most cunning swordsman I've ever met. I'm curious. How did you become a swordsman with your personality? And you even became a sword immortal." Yi Xian said seriously, "Talent. My master said that I'm the most talented in all of history." "Your master said," Yunsheng almost cursed. As if recalling something, he paused and said, "The owner of that sword said that?" Yi Xian nodded. "Of course. My master said that I'm an exceptional sword Dao genius. One day, the entire never-ending starfield will submit to my sword. I, Yi Xian, will stop." The old man suddenly waved his hand. "Just pretend that the old man didn't ask. Just stop." Yi Xian was speechless. This continued for about 2 hours before Yunsheng suddenly waved his right hand. A sword with a scabbard suddenly flew out of the pool and landed steadily in front of him. Yunsheng turned to look at Yi Xian and handed the sword to Yi Xian. "Take a look." Yi Xian quickly took the sword and unsheathed it. Buzz. A sword's hum suddenly rang through the sky. It was a sword. The sword in Yi Xian's hand was 3 feet long and 2 fingers wide. At first glance, it looked like a very, very ordinary sword. Yi Xian looked at the scabbard. The scabbard was dark and there were some mysterious patterns around it. Apart from that, it also emitted a cold and gloomy aura. At this moment, Yunsheng suddenly said, "This sword only has the shape of your sword. It doesn't have a soul. However, for you now, this sword should be just right. As for the scabbard, I forged it with frost iron. Both the sword and the scabbard are saint grade, and they are both supreme grade saint grade." Supreme grade saint grade. Yi Xian was moved. He knew that saint grade was divided into low grade saint grade, high grade saint grade, and supreme grade saint grade. The scabbard of the sword realm was supreme grade saint grade. It could be said that it was priceless. Yi Xian put away the sword and looked at Yunsheng. "Senior, thank you." Yunsheng glanced at Yi Xian and said calmly, "You're welcome. The old man is just a man of his word. Oh, if you really want to thank me, just don't look for the old man in the future." Then, he turned and left. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior, when will you teach me blacksmithing?" "Blacksmithing?" Yunsheng turned to look at Yi Xian. "When did the old man promise to teach you blacksmithing?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Sir, you told me earlier that I am your successor." Yunsheng blinked. "You believe that?" Yi Xian said, "Of course." Yunsheng snorted coldly. The old man said it casually. "Why would you believe it?" Yi Xian said calmly, "Senior said it casually." Those two took it seriously. Saying this, he sighed softly. "Sigh, it doesn't matter if Senior teaches me or not. I'm afraid that if I ruin Senior's reputation in the future, then I deserve to die 1,000 times. Yunsheng frowned. "Ruin my reputation? How can you ruin my reputation?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Everyone knows that I'm Senior's disciple. If I forge something rubbish, won't Senior's reputation be ruined?" Hearing this, Yunsheng's face darkened. He stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian turned and ran away. Yunsheng was silent for a moment, then he turned and left. Yi Xian returned to Dao Yi Academy. As soon as he returned to Dao Yi Academy, he was summoned by the first elder to Dao Yi Hall. Yi Xian was stunned when he entered the hall. There were 2 people in the hall. They were Yun Shao and the young man. Yun Shao was expressionless when he saw Yi Xian, but the young man's face was gloomy. The first elder glanced at Yi Xian. "These 2 are from the Yun family in the heaven domain. I heard from Yun Shao that you had some conflict with them." "Conflict?" Yi Xian was struck dumb. He was a little confused. "What conflict?" The first elder's eyes twitched. "This guy is playing dumb again." Beside him, Yun Shao cast a cold glance at Yi Xian. "What conflict?" He pointed at the young man nearby. "Did you cause that wound between his eyebrows? He almost died at your hands." "You." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior, don't talk nonsense. When I sparred with this brother earlier, we were evenly matched. If it wasn't for Senior stopping us in time, I might have already been defeated by this brother. He then cupped his fists at the young man. Brother, you're powerful. I, Yi Xian, admire you. Hearing this, the young man was stunned. Not far away, Yun Zhao's face darkened. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.